not gonna save you. Ignore it, they'll be fine. Leave the laws the same down in white clay. Down in white clay. Down in white clay. Down in white clay.
Everyone enjoys the great outdoors. You or someone you know can make it even more enjoyable by getting involved with the Arbor Day Foundation. The Arbor Day Foundation has grown to become the largest nonprofit membership organization dedicated to planting trees. Over 1 million members, supporters, and valued partners accompany the Arbor Day Foundation. By volunteering with the Arbor Day Foundation, you can breathe easy knowing that you're making a difference. For more information on how to get involved, call toll-free at 1-888-448-7337. That's 1-888-448-7337.
The next Mayor Ritma Ross Media Arts Center's movie countdown has begun. UNL's Ross Media Center presents a variety of movies, videos, films, and documentaries. The Ross doesn't only offer you an alternative to commercial film and television fare, but also a time to sit back and enjoy the creative art of cinema. So take a break or go on a date at the Mayor Ritma Ross Media Arts Center. For showtimes, visit the Ross Media Arts Center's website, theross.org. That's theross.org.
Oh, when it all,
Yeah.
all falls down.
This the real one, baby.
I'm telling you,
Chi-town stand up.
Oh, when it
South side, we gon' set this party off right. West side, we gon' set this party.
Good evening and happy Hump Day, basketball fans. You're listening to Give and Go on KRNU2 for the next couple of hours, and every Wednesday night from 6 to 8. We'll be coming to you live talking NBA basketball. We've got everything from the biggest storylines of the week to fantasy insight, weekly power rankings, as well as previews and predictions of upcoming games. I'm Brandon Wendt, and alongside, as always, Mr. Drew Montanye. How you doing today, Drew?
I'm doing pretty good, Brandon. How about you?
I am absolutely terrific. I'm really excited to get the show going. I look forward to this every week. I'm ready to talk some basketball. We've got a whole lot to get to, so I guess we might as well jump right in.
Let's do it. And just a reminder to folks out there, we have permission to go about an extra half an hour tonight, so we'll actually be going until about 8:30, so let's kick this off.
All right, well, we'll start off with the biggest news of the week. Those of you who are NBA basketball fans, I'm sure have heard plenty. Kobe Bean Bryant made his debut Sunday night against the Toronto Raptors at home. Played his second game last night at home against Phoenix. Got off to a bit of a slow start in the first game. He was 2 of 9 from the field with only 9 points. He turned the ball over 8 times. In his second game, he really stepped it up a little bit, played more efficiently. He was 6 of 11 for 20 points, 8 of 8 from the free throw line, only turned it over a couple times. What did you think about Kobe's debut, Drew?
Well, it was a good start to a long, well, what we thought would be a little bit longer, rather a short comeback from Kobe. Supposed to be out around a year-ish with that injury, probably a little bit less than that. We were looking at the 10 to 11-month range. Came back, and I think 8 it was. And he, for coming off of an Achilles injury at 35 years old, seemed to be doing pretty well. Put up 9 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals. He had 8 turnovers, which kind of put a damper on that. But you got to expect a little bit of rust when you're coming off of an injury that bad.
Yeah, that's expected from a guy coming off of an Achilles injury, especially at his age. I would expect, though, that if anybody's going to come back strong, it's going to be Kobe Bryant. He puts in a lot of hard work. I'm assuming that he worked very hard to get his shot back into form, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I was expecting a little bit more out of him from that first game, but you can give him a break being off for 8 months or so. I really liked the way he played last night. It was a bit of a letdown to me that he didn't step it up a little more in the fourth quarter when they were down. I believe he checked back into the game with about 6 minutes to go, and I kind of expected a classic Kobe takeover. You know, I wanted him to get the ball every time down the floor and post up or do one of his great fadeaways and just take over that game. It really didn't happen. The Lakers ended up losing, but that would have been nice to see.
Absolutely, and his second game back, like you said last night, he had 20 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, and he only had 3 turnovers. I really feel like he was actually doing all that he could, really, last night. He was really performing up to Kobe standards, if you will, and he's still shaking off a little bit of that rust, He usually averages, I think people are expecting him to get about 23, 24 a game. So having 20 in that second game back, I think, shows a real improvement from where he was at that first game. Even just that quick jump to the second game showed kind of his resilience, if you will, in a way, because he talked about it that he didn't think he had played as bad as he expected he would in that first game. And his first game, in my account, is, for an average NBA player, pretty terrible. Obviously, coming off an Achilles, not going to have a great game, but showing that he can still get out there and put up 20 points whenever he wants to kind of solidified the fact that he still is Kobe Bryant to me.
Yeah, and I like that he got those 20 points on only 11 shots. That was really nice to see. 6 of 11, I mentioned, and 8 of 8 from the free throw line. That's the best way to score for Kobe. I don't like those box scores where he puts up 25 to 30 shots and scores 25 to 30 points. That's not an efficient way to play, and it's really not going to help the Lakers out at all. And speaking of that, what did you think about the Lakers, the way they played with Kobe back in the lineup?
Well, they slowed down too much for me. You had said it a couple times this year. They're third, I think you said, in pace of play. And when Kobe got in there and grabbed the ball, he really slowed that offense down. You could kind of see he went for that ISO. Last night he had that dunk, the only dunk that he's had since he's got back, where he kind of went ISO on the left wing and took I don't remember who it was that he took to the rack, but went in, scored a dunk, and that play ended up taking about 15 seconds, something that the Lakers really aren't used to this year. They're not used to slowing that ball down. So I think once the whole team kind of as a whole gets used to him doing that and not necessarily hopefully he doesn't always kill the fast break or whatever it may be, but just hopefully he gets into that groove where he's not taking ISO all the time.
Yeah, that's really what I was interested in seeing as Kobe came back, was how they were going to work him in to their offense. They've been running that real fast pace, like you mentioned. They run a lot of pick and roll. They swing the ball around the outside. They shoot a whole lot of threes. And that's one thing that's really gone down since his return is the number of three-pointers they've taken as a team. I don't know the exact number, but it's something like around 10 less three-pointers in each of these 2 games since he's came back. So that's something to really keep an eye on. You'd like to think that as time goes on, as he plays more games with the team, that they'll mesh a little bit more, they'll figure it out, and he'll be able to fit in nicely with their offense. But at the same time, knowing Kobe's game, I just don't know if that's going to happen. I don't see Kobe being a guy who can just play off the ball and catch and shoot. And he's like you mentioned, he's an ISO player. He catches the ball either in the post or on the elbow. He's either facing up or backing the player down, and he goes to work. And when he's on, that can be extremely effective, but it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the team.
Well, the thing is, he prides himself in being able to beat everybody off the ball and making sure that he can beat everyone to get where he wants to and do what he wants to. Something I think he's going to struggle with for at least the first 10 to 15 games here while he's shaking off some of this rust. You saw it in the first game. His dribbling was poor. At best, he was real sloppy with the ball. He turned it over 8 times, like I said. So watching how he kind of challenges himself to get over that hump, I think will be a big step for the team. And like you said, 10 less three-pointers or whatever it was per game, I think that can be overcome when you get to the more of a him figuring out how he needs to fit in with their offense. Because he's said it a few times on his way to coming back that he really does want to just try and fit in with this offense. And obviously, it's like getting a free agent. He doesn't just blend in right away. You saw it with the big 3 in Miami. It took Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron some time to mesh together and figure out how they needed to play off of each other.
Well, and especially because this team has been playing now for about a month, they've kind of got a chemistry together. They've been playing pretty good basketball, and it's tough, like you said, for anybody to come in, in the off season. We'll just imagine a player coming in a month into the season. It's going to be tough. Another thing that really worries me, I guess I shouldn't say worries me. It shows me that he's not quite back. He's 0 for 5 from 3-point distance so far, and that's something that Kobe has really worked on over the years, is becoming a better 3-point shooter. He's always been a good mid-range guy, but he worked on adding the 3 to his game. And him being 0 for 5 so far, that really just tells me that he's still not back completely yet. He's probably not getting quite the lift that he's looking for on his jump shots. You know, you really got to get your legs into it when you're shooting a three-point shot. So that's something that I would look for him to improve as the season goes on, and as he gets those game legs underneath him, as the players like to say.
Yeah, I think one of the key things to him fitting in with that offense is getting his legs back underneath him, getting some of those cardio. I heard someone on ESPN the other day talking about how he's a little bit overweight right now. He weighs about 10 pounds more than he's used to play, and so that's going to affect his cardio quite a bit. And with this team, your cardio is very important. Running up and down the court, being fast with the ball in Mike D'Antoni's offense. I think when he gets his legs back under him, that's when he'll truly start. You'll see him start to try and fit in even more with this offense than he is right now.
Well, and that's one of those things that you don't really know how long that's going to take. There's not just a formula that says, oh, okay, he's been back for 2 weeks, his legs are back. You know, at his age, coming off of an injury like that, you don't really know how long that's going to take, and it might be one of those things that it won't all come back at once. Things will come back progressively as the season goes on. So I think fans, and really Kobe himself, being the type of player that he is, the type of person he expects so much out of himself, I think it's going to be tough for him to go through this period of coming back from a serious injury like that.
Yeah, and he talked about it too in a few interviews. He said he really, after 4 or 5 months with this injury, didn't know if he was going to be able to come back and do the things that he could. And for him, that meant facing retirement. He is not one to step down from a challenge by any means. However, that being said, he has told us many times in interviews, press conferences, whatever you may want to recall, that the day that he cannot do the things he expects himself to do is the day he will retire. And I fully believed with him coming back that he would still be able to do these things. Obviously, I think they're going to be in a reduced role. I don't think he'll be able to do them as well. But, and like you said, him coming back and really meshing with this team will take more than just that 2-week formula that's a kind of a fantasy, if you will. It'll really require him to get that cardio back, which might take up to, a month and a half sometimes. It depends on how rigorous he's getting, how many days off they have. It, I think, is a very important thing.
Yeah, that really is intriguing to me. You mentioned Kobe's one of those players that he's got a lot of pride. He's not the type of player that's going to just sit around in the league as a sixth man or as a role player off the bench in a few years just to kind of keep getting those paychecks. He's made a lot of money in his career through not only his contracts with the Lakers but also tons of endorsements. As soon as he can't do it anymore, he's going to retire, and that's something that I'm kind of interested to see as he comes back from this injury. What happens if he realizes that he's not the same player anymore? If he realizes that being 37 years old and coming off of an Achilles injury like that, he can't do what he wants to do. Is he going to hang him up at the end of the year? I mean, he just signed a 2-year contract, so I don't see that happening, but you never know.
Yeah, I don't see him hanging him off after this year. I think he's going to take a lot of pride in trying to get to that scoring title, first overall, getting above Kareem Abdul. Obviously, if you've seen the stats, he has to average something freakish, like 32 points a game the rest of the way, and that's assuming he plays every game. And for a guy like him who probably won't be playing more than 35 minutes, or at least I would hope he's not playing more than about 35 minutes tonight at his age coming off the Achilles, that's going to be a really difficult thing for him to do. And being in that Mike D'Antoni offense, if they're free-flowing, those points are going to be a lot more spread out than they were when he was with Phil Jackson running the triangle, and he could be that focal point where you knew he was going to get however many points he wanted.
Yeah, I don't think that the scoring is necessarily all that important to him. The scoring title, the career scoring title. I mean, I'm sure he'd like to have that, but what he's said all along that he really wants is that 6th ring. That's something that he's going after. And I don't know if I see it in the near future. I really don't. I don't see the Lakers. Obviously, this team isn't a championship team, and their hopes are to go out and get somebody in the offseason, but is there really anybody that's a legitimate option to come to LA that's going to put them over the top?
The only option that you have to put you over the top is Carmelo, and for Carmelo to be put in there would require Mike D'Antoni leaving, in my opinion. There's no way you can put Carmelo and Kobe, 2 isolation guys, in that offense and expect them to produce a championship. Carmelo's kind of a lazy defensive player. He's not lazy on offense by any means, but he really focuses on that turnaround fadeaway shot, whether it be from 18 feet or 15 feet. Baseline elbow doesn't matter. But the only other option that I would see is maybe a Kevin Love when he opts out of his contract, not this year but next. The possibility of him coming out there as a free agent after he opts out of that 4-year contract that he's got a player option after the 3rd year.
Yeah, Carmelo to me is a terrible idea. I know it's been mentioned in the media. They've even talked about it a little bit, the possibility of Carmelo going to L.A. Like you said, it definitely wouldn't fit in D'Antoni's offense, especially after Carmelo and D'Antoni kind of butted heads in New York. I really don't think it would fit in any offense. Those two players on the floor at one time are not going to mesh.
No, absolutely not. Carmelo and Kobe play too similar on offense to be able to mesh. And I can't see Kobe being okay with Carmelo not showing any work on the defensive end.
Yeah, Kobe's a winner, and he knows that defense comes with winning. I mean, it could be a good thing for Carmelo's career to play with Kobe. Maybe Kobe would kind of kick him in the butt to say to make him a better defensive player. That being said, I don't know if that's possible with Carmelo. He's an interesting case to me. I think that he's got a lot to work on. Carmelo might be one of those players that kind of goes down in history as somewhat of a bust because all he's done is score a whole bunch of points, and that doesn't necessarily always win you championships. Moving on to another player similar to Carmelo, kind of scores a lot of points, doesn't play all that efficiently, or at least hasn't in the last couple of years, and that's Rudy Gay. And that's the other big story from this week in the NBA was the Toronto Raptors and their wizard of a GM, Masai Ujiri, were somehow able to get rid of that contract that Rudy Gay has that has another year on it at $19 million, assuming that Gay picks the option up, which I'm sure he will, based on what rumor has it that he'll be making in free agency if he were to opt out. The Raptors picked up Grievous Vasquez, Patrick Patterson, John Salmons, and Chuck Hayes in the deal. The Kings got Quincy Acey and Aaron Gray along back with Rudy Gay. What are your initial thoughts on this deal?
I really like it for Toronto. They get all of their long-term contracts off the table now. The only one left, I believe, is Kyle Lowry sitting there on the table. I think DeRozan signed for another 2 years, but none of these are major contracts. Obviously, like Gay's were at $19 million. That opened up a lot of opportunities for them to kind of pick and choose what they wish to do, whether it be rebuilding the draft or possibly go and try and get a big-name free agent. One thing that I started thinking about earlier today was maybe Chris Bosh coming back if the big three in Miami separates. I don't think there's a great chance of it. However, it'd be kind of an interesting dynamic or story to see him go back there. And for Sacramento picking up Rudy Gay, if they can get him to be more efficient and maybe play less minutes, I think that's the only way this is a good deal for them.
Yeah, that's the key right there, is getting Rudy Gay to be efficient and learn how to play a little more off the ball. Definitely. They should still try to run that offense through DeMarcus Cousins. They also have Isaiah Thomas, who's really stepped up. I had him as the front runner to be the sixth man of the year. Now that Vasquez is gone, he'll be moving into the starting lineup. He had a terrific first game the other night against Dallas. I like the deal. I like the deal for both teams. I know that both of us have kind of been harsh on Rudy Gay so far this season, and we were justified in doing so. The way he was playing in Toronto, the amount of shots he was putting up, it's just not conducive to winning basketball. But we definitely saw the player that he can be when in the right role, when he played in Memphis, when he was with Randolph and Gasol and then Mike Conley running the point. It's really somewhat similar to what they've got in Sacramento. I mean, I don't want to put Randolph and Gasol and DeMarcus Cousins in the same conversation because DeMarcus Cousins, although talent-wise is maybe as good as them, just as an NBA player is nowhere, even close to their league, just in how they're professionals, how they go about their business. But we've seen what he can do in that type of situation with a point guard who likes to come off the pick and roll, can dish off the pick and roll, and also knock down a shot. That's kind of what you have in Isaiah Thomas, and that's what he had in Memphis with Mike Conley. And then with talented big down low like DeMarcus Cousins, like you said, if he can play efficiently, learn how to play off the ball, I think it can be a good move for them.
Yeah, and I know you and me both heard it on the Ion Basketball podcast. Zach Harper, Matt Moore. I think one of the best things that Rudy Gay could do for himself is to try and rebound and assist more, because you see a lot of those stat lines that he gets. There's no rebounds, no assists, lots of turnovers, maybe 1 or 2 steals here and there. But other than that, it's just been inefficient scoring. And that's kind of my biggest issue with Rudy Gay. He's making $19 million a year. I believe that's third most expensive contract in the league right now. I don't see a way, unless Rudy Gay kind of changes his game, that this contract works out. And it would be nice for Sacramento if he would opt out. But with $19 million sitting on the table, I don't see that happening.
No, there's no chance he opts out, unless, I guess I shouldn't say no chance, because the only chance he has of opting out is if he has a terrific rest of the season, helps Sacramento get to the playoffs, which I also don't see happening in that strong Western Conference. But just, let's use our imaginations here and say that Rudy Gay has a terrific season, pushes them to the playoffs. Then there's a slight possibility that he would be looked at as a possible max player going into the offseason, and he would opt out and look to sign with someone else. But I don't see that happening at all.
Yeah, I don't see him being a max contract guy anywhere, regardless of how this season plays out. I think his best shot is at the end of this season, probably ending up at like around a $12 million a year option, kind of like you saw Andre Iguodala get out in Golden State this year. Obviously, Iguodala is a different player, plays all around, very efficient, great on defense. That being said, Gay is just one of those players, Rudy Gay, who you kind of don't. He's the piece of the puzzle that kind of not got lost, but it's extra in the box when you get it. It doesn't fit anywhere. It doesn't match up with anything. He's another one of trying to think. I'm drawing a blank now with the player. J.J. Hickson. He kind of reminds me of him in the sense that he doesn't fit anywhere necessarily. His skill set is so unique, and it worked well in college, or I believe he came straight out of high school.
Hickson?
No, Gay.
Oh, no, Gay went to UConn.
Okay, but nonetheless, one of those things where it works in the lower levels, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the NBA level as well as it should.
Well, see, talent-wise, skill-wise, I really think that Rudy Gay can fit in just about any situation. It's more the way he plays that doesn't fit in to me. Just the fact that he's an ISO player, but he's really not that good at it. Skill-wise, he's a big, tall, strong. He's very athletic. He can slash. He can knock down shots. I mean, I know his shot has declined a little bit since having that shoulder surgery a few years ago, but even with that, he's shooting better from three-point line this year than he has in the past couple of years. I think as skill-wise, he can fit in just about any system. It's just that the way he plays has to change. He's got to model his game around, I don't know, somebody else that's more of a team player that can play off the ball and do a variety of things, be that Swiss Army knife for the team, rather than be the focal point, the guy who's getting the ball and putting it on the floor, whatever it may be, and trying to score every time down the court.
See, that's the problem. I think he sees himself as that guy who is going to get all the points, who does want to handle the ball. I don't see him getting out of that role. I think he's kind of concreted himself into the I'm supposed to be the superstar wherever I go. And I don't see a way that he kind of gets out of that frame of mind without kind of getting a slap in the face and dose of reality, if you will.
I really think he can. I have faith in him still. I'm not giving up on him by any means, just because I've seen what he can do, the type of talent that he is. And I think a big part of that mindset that he had of being the main man was the fact that he was in Toronto, where they were really in a rebuilding mode when they got him. I shouldn't say rebuilding mode, because he was supposed to be the piece that maybe pushed them into playoff contention. It didn't happen, obviously. They haven't really improved much since he got there. But if you look at the other guys on that roster, there's nobody else that's really like a big name, a star player. While when you come to Sacramento, although DeMarcus Cousins I wouldn't say is a star yet, because he's not really known outside of the big-time basketball fans. Your casual fan probably doesn't know much about DeMarcus Cousins. They probably know who he is and where he went to college and that kind of stuff, but they don't really know what he can do for a team. But that being said, everybody knows this is DeMarcus Cousins' team. Sacramento went and invested in him. They gave him a big contract extension. He has a very high usage rate, along with Isaiah Thomas. I think that this could be a good fit for Rudy Gay if it works out well, with him being able to kind of step back and be the second or third option behind Cousins and maybe even Isaiah Thomas.
See, the only part I disagree with you there is that this idea that got in his head that he is the guy started long before he got to before he got to Toronto. These last 2 years, 2.5 years, I think, even if you go back and look at statistics, watch some games, he started taking shots away from Zach Randolph and Marcus All, and that's one of the reasons they moved him. He didn't fit anywhere because he wanted to be that guy. He got that contract extension, and just kind of it's gotten worse ever since then. And I don't see, and without a dose of reality coming into play somewhere, whether it be from DeMarcus Cousins, the coach Isaiah Thomas, the city as a whole, whatever it may be, he needs to figure out that he is not a star player. He can be a star caliber guy, but he needs to adjust his game to, like you said, being that second, third option and really playing off ball, learn how to set picks, get rebounds, dish out assists, because that's the skill set that he has.
I really think he can, to be honest with you. I know that I sound like a broken record here, constantly saying I have faith in him, but I do. I mean, it's just hard for me to kind of give up on such a talented player, especially when the issue is just a mindset type of thing. That can change. I mean, he can go to this situation. You never know. I don't know what DeMarcus Cousins is like, but just based on seeing him on the court, he's a very emotional player. He doesn't seem to be afraid to speak his mind, and that's something that could be good for Rudy Gay. If he steps in there and DeMarcus says, "Hey, listen up. I know you've been in the league longer. You've had this kind of success. Well, this is my team. You're taking a back seat." Or even, Shaquille O'Neal. He's a part owner with the Kings. I think that somebody will tell him that. I mean, the Kings they're not stupid. They have this new ownership group, the new GM, D'Alessandro, who was actually Masai Ujiri's understudy in Denver. They know what they're doing. They wouldn't just go trade for Rudy Gay and just throw him in there and say, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, obviously they have a plan. They traded for him, and they're going to tell him, what they want him to do. And I'm hoping that is step back and take a back seat to DeMarcus Cousins.
I would hope that'd be the case because DeMarcus Cousins is going to have a flourishing career here coming up. He got that big contract, like you said. He's been playing better ball this year than he has any of his years past. He's more efficient, has a higher usage percentage. He's playing way better than he ever has. That being said, I feel like one of the main reasons that Sacramento picked him up was because it is an expiring contract, and they have Cousins locked up past when this is going to run out. I think if you can show Cousins after Gay is gone potentially that they're going to try and make a focal point of building around Cousins and maybe getting one of these top draft picks, even in the top 10, it's looking like at this point it's going to give you a really good NBA caliber player. I think that was one of the main focal points. Obviously, if you can get Rudy Gay to take that back seat, I love the trade for both sides. We already talked about Toronto. It wasn't really a discussion. They got a great bargain here, getting rid of Gay, getting 4 guys who are all on expiring contracts.
Well, yeah, and anybody who thinks that Toronto was making this move to get better just doesn't know what they're talking about. This move was clearly, without a doubt, to free up that cap space, to get out from underneath of that contract, and to prepare for this rebuilding era. They brought in Masai Ujiri, like I mentioned before, the former Denver Nuggets general manager. He wants to scrap this, start all over new. And even with that being said, I kind of like the trade coming back for them. They got a guy in Patrick Patterson who's a nice role player. I think that I don't know if they're necessarily going to keep him beyond this year or next year. They could very easily move him along. But if they do, it's not a bad addition. He's a solid player who can do quite a few different things. He can play. He's mostly a power forward. I guess he can slip into the small forward a little bit. He's really worked on his shooting. He's having a tough shooting year so far this year, but in general, over the last few years, he's worked on his jump shot a little bit. And Grievous Vasquez is someone that I really like. I mean, he was second in the NBA in assists last year. He went to Sacramento and really saw a minutes decrease because he was sharing time with Isaiah Thomas. He's someone that I think especially if they end up moving Kyle Lowry, could fit in and maybe even be the point guard of the future there. And it's very low risk for them. These aren't big contracts that they're taking on. They're guys that they can just pass right along at the end of the year and send them into free agency if they decide it doesn't work for them. And that's also how I feel about the Kings in this situation. I mean, we did mention that Rudy Gay's contract has a player option for $19 million after this season, but at the same time, it's a low risk. You talked about how DeMarcus Cousins is locked up. The Kings have a lot of financials. They have like a lot of space, a lot of just kind of free money floating around right now that they can use to kind of experiment with. They went and got Gay, and if it works out, it could be great. You know what I mean? This team with the core of Isaiah Thomas and Gay and DeMarcus Cousins could turn out to be really great, but if it doesn't, Rudy Gay's gone in 2 years, assuming he picks up his option, and they can move on, with trying to figure the next option out.
Absolutely. And let's move on to another trade, not necessarily a rumor, but a trade discussion in Omer Asik for the Rockets. The Rockets have come out and said that they are looking to trade Asik between December 15th and December 19th. December 15th being the first day that players who signed off-season contracts can be traded. And then December 19th is the last day that any player gained in an Asik deal can be repackaged in a later trade for Houston. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my initial thoughts is kind of what was expected. We all knew that Omer Asik was going to be traded at some point this year. There's no real point in having him there with Dwight Howard. They can't play on the floor at the same time, so there's really nothing you can do with Asik, and you're paying him way too much money to be a guy that's playing 8 to 10 minutes a game. So you knew that was going to be moved. There's been rumors that the Sixers could be a possible landing spot for Asik. I really don't like that at all.
No.
I like it from the Rockets' perspective because they could get someone back like a Spencer Hawes or a Thaddeus Young, which is someone that would fit their role as a stretch big. Young being a stretch 4 and Spencer Hawes being a stretch 5. Guys that are bigs, they're power forwards or centers, and that can step outside and knock down jump shots. But from the perspective of Philadelphia, I don't know why in the world they would go get Omer Asik. They're in a rebuilding stage. They've got Nerlens Noel, who was their first draft pick this year, their first-round pick. They have no need for a guy that has an option for $15 million next season. That's a defensive center, especially in a rebuilding mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you totally on the Philly thing. I don't think Asik fits in Philly at all, and I don't like the trade really for either sides. You said, you can get a stretch 4, you have the possibility of Spencer Hawes, Thaddeus Young coming back from Philly, give you a stretch 4-5 option in Houston, but I don't know how the logistics would work. We'd have to look at that separately, but I really don't. I've tried to come up with a few things on the ESPN trade machine. I've tried to come up with a few landing spots for him in my head. I can't think of a really rock solid spot that works really, really well for him.
No, I really can't either, and that's what's going to be tough for Houston is that you would think it would be an easy trade because who doesn't want a 7-foot-tall, stellar defensive rebounding center? But really there's nowhere out there that seems to make sense for me. The one that I like the most is still Portland. But I haven't really heard anything about that. There hasn't been any rumors about Portland being interested in him. Maybe they're just satisfied with what they've been getting from Robin Lopez.
Yeah, and with Robin Lopez you kind of have that, he's an NBA caliber guy. You know what you're going to get from him. He plays steady minutes. He doesn't get hurt that often. And when he does, it's usually for 2 or 3 games, not enough to really kill you on the standings. And that I don't know if they want to mess with their chemistry right now. They're atop the Western Conference right now. I think it would be. I agree with you that Portland would be the best place. He is really a rich man. You've said it before. A rich man's Robin Lopez. My apologies. He's just better than Robin Lopez in all facets of the game. If they can make that go down and Houston can get rid of him, maybe bring Robin Lopez back to just play, maybe 15, 20 minutes behind Dwight Howard, I think that'd work perfectly for them.
It would, and although he is an upgrade over Robin Lopez, I wonder if it's really worth it for them. They're still a young team. I know they've gotten off to a really hot start, and people are looking at them as contenders, but it almost might be better for them to kind of hang on to some of those young assets that they have. You know, they would maybe have to give up C.J. McCollum, I don't know, Joel Freeland, Myers Leonard, Thomas Robinson, some of those types of players to get a hold of an Ashiq. And if they're doing that, that means they're all in. If they're going to go get rid of their young talent for someone who's considered a premier defensive center, that's telling me that they're all in. They want to compete in the Western Conference. And I don't know if they're really at that stage yet. I mean, they might be, they might not be. I don't know for sure, but it's just something that I'm interested in seeing as the season goes on.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see kind of how this whole situation gets dealt with. I think it's more of a complex issue than even you and I can kind of understand or think of at this point. It's not really one of those things that, as people who are just analysts, we don't have all the details. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes right now. We know the players. We know where he'd fit best. I think this will be kind of a surprise thing going on. I think this is when this trade does go down, because Houston is going to deal him somewhere. They can't keep him, really. I mean, they could if they really wanted to, but it's just not a realistic option. I think this will be a shocker to the whole league.
Yeah, there's no way they keep him. I just think it's totally a terrible idea to have a backup center that's making as much money as he is. So I think that that's something that they'll definitely move him. And it's just, I feel like they're probably talking to someone, and we don't even know about it. There hasn't been any rumors about it. There will be some team that swoops in and picks him up. With that being said, we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the possibility of abolishing divisions. The future NBA Commissioner Adam Silver brought that up this week. So we'll give that a little bit of a talk. You're listening to Give and Go on KRNU2.
For a little extra help settling in at college, look to UNL's first-year experience and transition programs. You can receive one-on-one student coaching and tutoring to get you through that tough course. Or you can attend free workshops for information on stress, money, even jobs and internships. First-year experience and transition programs will assist you with academic support or general life skills to make your experience at UNL successful. Stop by First Year Experience and Transition Programs located at 127 Love Library South.
ASUN Student Legal Services is a prepaid legal service funded by student fees. The assistance provided by Student Legal Services include legal advice on most types of legal problems and court representation if the case involves a landlord-tenant dispute, consumer complaint, misdemeanor offense, or uncontested divorce. Any UNL student in need of legal help should call 472-3350 to set up an appointment with an attorney. SLS is located in room 335 in the Nebraska Union on City Campus.
I don't understand this.
What is it?
Sociology?
Well, why don't you get a tutor?
Because I don't have that kind of money right now.
Well, you should check out OASIS, the Office of Academic Support and Intercultural Services. They offer study skills sessions, mentoring, and tutoring for students.
OASIS? Oh yeah, I've heard of it. But isn't it only for students of color?
No, it does place an emphasis on supporting students of color, but it's not just limited to only minorities. You should call 472-7725 for more information.
Well, you can tell everybody. Yeah, you can tell everybody. Go ahead and tell everybody. I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man. I believe every lie that I ever told.
Welcome back to Give and Go Basketball on KRNU2 Young Bloods. We got a score update for you. Orlando up 20-18 on Charlotte, and about 11 minutes left in the second quarter. And Los Angeles Clippers at Boston tipping off. We got a renewal. Doc Rivers going back to Boston for the first time since changing head coaching jobs. We're going to come back to the topic here, like Brandon said before the break. Possibility of division abolishment. Adam Silver talked about it on the new NBA XM radio show, that the competition committee was going to review the possibility of possibly abolishing divisions. What are your opinions on that, Brandon?
I really like the idea. We've seen it especially this year with the putrid Atlantic Division and the Eastern Conference, and really the Eastern Conference as a whole, that divisions are just kind of, they're overrated. I mean, the fact that whoever wins that Atlantic Division, whether it be Boston or even the Brooklyn Nets or the Knicks, if they can figure things out, will be the 4th seed going into the playoffs when you're going to have teams from other divisions behind them. I just really don't like the idea of that. I don't like the idea of a team that doesn't deserve to be a home court advantage team in the first round having a home court advantage.
Yeah, Boston right now at 10-13, sitting in the 4th spot in the Eastern Conference. If the conferences weren't there and the rule was not there that the winner of each division had to be in the top 4, Boston would currently be a 7th seed in the Eastern Conference, and Charlotte would actually at 10-11 have that home court advantage for the first round if playoffs started today. I don't see that holding personally, but that's another conversation. I would take it a step further, and we might get into this a little bit later. I don't even think they should have conferences. When we get a little bit more into this discussion, I'll bring up some things that I was working on today. But I really do like this idea where if you can start this kind of like a domino effect of abolishing conferences, I think you should do it as soon as you can, possibly even next year.
I strongly disagree with the conferences idea. I mean, what are your ideas for a playoff system if they were to abolish conferences?
Well, if they were to abolish conferences, for me, it would be the top 16 seeds, and you would see it kind of pan out like an NCAA bracket, if you will. What I came up with is that you would have currently the scheduling works out like this. Each team has to play 4 games against the other 4 teams in their division, so that's 16 games. Then they have 4 games against 6 out-of-division conference opponents, which is another 24 games. Then they have 3 games against the remaining 4 conference teams, which is another 12 games, and then 2 games against teams in the opposing conferences, 15 times 2 apiece, another 30, giving you a total of 82 games in an NBA season. What I would propose is that they have 3 games versus 20 other teams in the league. So let's just go, for example, the Cleveland Cavaliers play 20 of the other teams in the NBA 3 times. That gives you a total of 60 games. Then you have 2 games versus the other 9 teams. There's 30 in the league. You can't count yourself in this. So you'd have a total of 18 games there. 2 times 9, 18. You have a total of 78 games per season. I think this would work, and I think it would be a lot better as far as competition goes. You would get teams who have the better record into the playoffs. And you only shorten the season by 4 games. And if you're shortening the season by 4 games, you see a lot of guys getting injured. You see a lot of guys complaining that they're tired, halfway through the season. They need some time off. You see it with D. Wade down in Miami. And it gives the teams a little bit of extra time to rest, get rehabilitated, if you will.
I definitely think that your idea is a good idea. I don't want to put down your idea by any means. It's just the fact I disagree with it along the lines of I'm a traditionalist. I like the Eastern Conference, the Western Conference. I like the rivalries that build up. We know this year that Miami and Indiana are going to face off at some point in the playoffs. And if you get to something where there's no conferences, that means that, sure, they might face off in the finals, but there's just too much up in the air with that. I like the way it's set up with the conferences, with the rivalries that are able to be built. And another thing is travel. I mean, NBA teams already complain about it enough with travel. Imagine if they were playing more against Western teams than they already are. Teams like New York and Boston having to travel all the way across the country a lot more often. I just think that it causes too many problems. I like the idea, though. I like where your head's at and that you want competition or better competition. But another thing is this year is an anomaly. I mean, yes, most of the time you can tell which conference is stronger, but it's very, very rare that we have a situation where one conference is just stacked from top to bottom while the other conference has the 2 great teams at the top and then is just empty after that. I really think that give it a couple years, especially with the strong draft class that is this year, a lot of these teams in the East, especially not only with the draft class but also with the cap space that they have opening up, I think that there's going to be teams in the East that are going to turn around really quick because they're going to draft a star player, go out and sign someone. I don't think that this is an issue that's going to last for very long.
Well, the only reason that it's not the only reason. Another reason that I would get rid of it, in my opinion, it would be okay to get rid of conferences. Obviously, I'm not a traditionalist like Brandon said he is. But the Western Conference currently has something along the lines of 13 teams within one game of being at 500 or are at or over 500. So there are 13 teams within one game of winning half of their games. In the Eastern Conference, there are 3 teams at or above 500. No team outside of that stat is within 2 games of being at 500. For me, it would clear up the fact that you have Golden State right now. I don't think this will continue, but they're in the 9th seed. But so you have a team like Minnesota currently sitting at 10 and 11. If they were in the Eastern Conference right now, they'd be sitting in the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference standings. So let's say you take out Detroit, Washington, Chicago, and Boston from the playoffs right now in the playoff picture. Then you put in Golden State, Memphis, Minnesota, and the Lakers, who are in the 4 teams right out of the 8th seed in the Western Conference. That it really advances your quality of play. It advances the quality of the product that is being put on your television screen, that if you go to NBA games that you're going to watch at an NBA game, especially come playoff time when that's most important. Come playoff time, you're expecting great basketball all the time.
Well, I agree. There's no arguing the fact that this year it would be better if there were no conferences. But like I said, it's just an anomaly, the fact that there are this many bad teams in the Eastern Conference. I just don't see this drastic of a change where you're completely abolishing not only divisions but also conferences as being that important in the long run. Of course, there is no getting around the fact that this year I would rather see the Timberwolves. What are a couple of the other teams you mentioned that were
Golden State, Memphis, Lakers?
Yeah, though I would much rather see those teams than the teams that are at the bottom half of the Eastern Conference this year. But just for the long run, I don't see it being a good idea to abolish conferences altogether, especially because then the issue will come up when there's 16 teams. If you were to go to your idea where 16 teams from either conference makes the playoffs, you get to that situation where maybe one year a bunch of teams around the, let's say, 14 to 18 or 14 to 20 range are really close record-wise. And, obviously only 2 or 3 of those teams could make the playoffs, and then a bunch would get left out. And you get put in that situation where maybe a bunch of teams from the West make the playoffs and a bunch of teams from the East get left out, even though their records are right behind them. They're basically just as good as those teams from the West. And then you've got a playoff system where teams that are good, like Chicago, say, or Boston, these big market teams don't make the playoffs, but they are really good just because some teams in the Western Conference have better records than them.
I get where you're coming from. My only problem is that it's not a this year kind of a deal to me. The Eastern Conference has just been nothing but a dumpster fire for the past 2 or 3 years past the 4 or 5 seed. You saw last year the Miami at number 1 versus the Bucks at the number 8 seed. The Bucks had no business being in the playoffs, none at all. Regardless of how hot their guys were doing at the end of the year, there was no reason they should have been there. I would have much rather seen a team like Minnesota or Memphis or even Dallas come in and play Miami at that 8 seed. It would have been a much more interesting matchup. It would have been more quality basketball. And you see this every year where the last at least 3 to 4 teams in the Eastern Conference have either an at 500 or below 500 record. And you see it in the West every year. There are teams who get left out, sometimes even to the 10th spot in the league or in the conference, that have more than 50 wins. They're going over 8 games over 500. I don't see how you can keep leaving these teams out of the playoffs when they're clearly better teams.
Well, see, the thing is I strongly disagree with the argument that you're putting forth right now. Yes, the East has been bad for a couple years now, but it's not like it's been forever that the East has just been so much worse than the West. I mean, sports are cyclical. That's the way they're set up with drafts. The worst teams get the best picks in the draft. Over time, it'll shift and shift back and shift, over and over again, it shifts. The power is always shifting. So, I mean, I understand that having a playoff system with no conferences, it does make it so that the 16 best teams are in the playoffs. I like that idea. I just don't think that the negatives of it, the fact that the travel, along with the possibility of these big market teams getting left out because they're close to just a few games behind a different team that's from a whole different conference, as well as getting rid of these playoff rivalries. I mean, just a couple years ago, the Celtics were terrific, and the Knicks weren't very good, but the Celtics were terrific, and Miami was great. I mean, that you're just basically saying get rid of all these playoff rivalries and turn into every single year these playoff matchups would be different. One year, the Heat would play Golden State in the playoffs, and the next year they would play some team from the East, and then the next year from the West. I mean, there's just too much randomness to this system that I really like where it's at, where we have these rivalries set up so that every year you go into the playoffs thinking we're going to see these great matchups like a Boston and Miami of a couple years ago, or an Indiana and Miami, or New York last year against a team like Indiana or Boston, or even Brooklyn if they can turn things around this year.
So I love playoff rivalries just as much as the next guy. You asked me about Clippers versus Memphis. That's my favorite matchup during the year, during the playoffs, anytime. I make jokes about it on the show all the time, jokes about it in person, whether we're just hanging out, whatever it may be. That being said, I think you still have these rivalries in season. These aren't rivalries that just are secluded to the playoffs. You saw Miami and the Indiana Pacers go off and face each other last night, and those guys they really cared. They know that they both wanted to beat the other team, especially Indiana. They've been talking about it all week that they've wanted to win constantly. They want home court advantage so that they can beat Miami in the playoffs, and I get that. But I don't think that necessarily them being kind of predestined to meet in the Eastern Conference Finals is something you should have every year. I think if they meet up in the playoffs, that's fantastic. They're still going to get in this is in my proposed thing, my proposed scheduling. They're still going to get 3 matchups per year. Currently, they're getting 3 to 4, depending on how the rotation works that year. I think they're currently on the rotation where they play each other 4 times a year. That being said, you don't need to see these teams, and maybe it be a thing where for the playoffs you scratch my idea of the conferences, but maybe you say, okay, just the top 16 teams with the best records get into the playoffs, because these Miami versus Milwaukee, Miami versus this year it could be Charlotte, Detroit, Washington. I think it was Bulls and who did the Bulls play last year, the first round of the playoffs? It wasn't Brooklyn. I mean, these are all matchups that are nice, but this year like you said, it's an anomaly. It's never usually this bad. This year's just bringing the issue kind of to the forefront. Maybe you put the top 16 teams overall into the playoffs and seed them from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at last year's standings, and I just don't really think that. I mean, you keep bringing up this Miami versus Milwaukee matchup, and yes, I agree, it was a bad matchup, and there's no way that Milwaukee should be in the playoffs. But if you look at the teams in the Western Conference that just barely missed the playoffs last year, the Utah Jazz, I mean, they were an okay team last year, but if the Utah Jazz matched up against the Miami Heat, it wouldn't even be close last year. The Utah Jazz were a slow pace, toss it into Al Jefferson and Paul Millsap, and just kind of work the post. Miami would have ran all over them. They were the ninth place team last year in the West. After that is Dallas, who, yes, they've improved a lot this year with the addition of Monte Ellis, as well as Dirk kind of continuing to come back from that injury that he had last year, where last year he missed pretty much half of the season, the first half of the season, before he finally came back, and then it took him quite a while to get back into his groove. That Dallas team wasn't any good last year. The 11th team was Portland. They were a great starting lineup with the rookie sensation and Damian Lillard, along with Aldridge and Batum and Wes Matthews. But last year they had no depth whatsoever, which really shows up in the playoffs. I really don't see it being that big of a deal. I mean, there's teams at the bottom of the conference every year that really shouldn't be in the playoffs. If there's anything that's going to help the competition of the NBA, it would be to cut down the size of the playoffs, have only 6 teams from each conference make it into the playoffs. But we know that's not going to happen, and that's just a money thing. The more teams that make it, the more games that are played, the more money that the league makes.
Yeah, and I get that, but like last year, Boston, and we can keep going back and forth on it, but it is in my opinion that the Eastern Conference last year, the bottom 3 seeds, really did not need to be in the playoffs. It was just you knew these teams were not going to make it. Boston got beat out by the Knicks in the first round. Brooklyn Nets actually, I believe, lost to the 5 seed at the 4 seed in playing the Bulls. And like I said, I've said it a few times, the Bucks lost to the Miami Heat. I don't see how you, especially it's this year that's really putting a spotlight on it. But last year, I would have rather seen the Utah Jazz go up against the Heat. I think they could have taken 2 games from them if Miami was taking an off night. Obviously, I don't think LeBron wants to get past 5. But the way that Utah was playing towards the end of the season last year, I mean, they were not going to win that game. No one was going to beat Miami in the first 2 rounds last year. But to show a better quality of play, I see no reason that you can't realign how you do the playoffs and just make it the best 16 teams. Whether you want to sub guys from the West and put them into the East, which I don't think works. I think the best way you can make this happen is you do an NCAA-style bracket where you just fill in the seeds. Whether, say, we go from right now, you've got Indiana sitting at number 1, so they would be the number 1 overall seed. Then you've got Portland right now, then San Antonio, then Miami, then Oklahoma City, just down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's so hard for me to kind of go back and forth on this topic because there's no denying that right now it would be better competition, and really probably overall the competition would be better every year if it was just a 1 through 16. There's really no arguing that. I mean, it's one of those things where it's just kind of how the NBA is. It's how sports are. It would be a very progressive move to do something like this, but I just don't think it's something that is plausible to completely abolish conferences with travel. I mean, these are long seasons. It is a grind to go through an NBA season. I mean, I don't know personally. I'm not an NBA player, but from what the players say is it's a grind, having to travel night in and night out, playing games, usually 3 to 4 games a week. I mean, every now and then teams only have 2 games a week, but for the most part, it's 3 or 4 games a week. I just don't see it being something that's possible where the league is going to let that happen, where there are no conferences, and a big part of it is money because the league wants the big market teams in the playoffs, and a lot of those big market teams are in the East. If the league can get New York and Brooklyn and Boston and Chicago in the playoffs, they're going to get them in the playoffs because they don't want these teams like Memphis, who, although they might be a pretty good basketball team, Memphis is not a big market, and that's not going to bring in a whole lot of money for the league. Basketball and really sports in general, it's not necessarily how good the teams are. The fans watch those marquee teams. They don't necessarily watch the best matchups. Like, say, you or me, we're diehard fans. We're going to watch the best games. We just want to see the best games and the best matchups, where the casual fan wants to see the big name teams with the big name players, the Brooklyns, New Yorks, Bostons, those kind of teams.
Yeah, and you bring up wanting to see the Brooklyn, New York matchups and whatnot. And this year, there's a strong likelihood, barring a New York Knick miracle and a Brooklyn Nets comeback, if you will, that both of those teams, the whole New York market, is going to be left out of this playoff system. You're also going to see Philadelphia, pretty large city, not in there. Toronto is, big of a market as they are, still not really a basketball city, more of a hockey. They're in Canada, more of a hockey-driven city. But then you go to the bottom, you're not going to have some of these West Coast teams like the Lakers. They're not going to be in the playoffs. Golden State's not going to be in the playoffs. Roracle, one of the best atmospheres in the NBA. You can just tell that by watching the game. Those fans get into it every night.
I think we can both agree that Golden State's most likely going to be in the playoffs.
Well, this is based off the assumption of how the standings are right now.
Yeah, right now they've lost Andre Iguodala for the past few weeks. We saw what they looked like before he went out.
Yeah, and that's another thing we could bring up. You see the demolishing of conferences. You could possibly end up seeing a Golden State versus an OKC matchup in the first round. You could start seeing things where the Clippers play someone from their own division. They play the Lakers in the first round of playoffs, barring a division abolishment. what do you think about these matchups?
Well, the matchups to me are great. That's one thing that I mentioned it before about the matchups in the Eastern Conference, the rivalries. I like the way this Western Conference is set up. Sure, the Eastern Conference playoffs is going to be really boring this year because you know who's going to win. You know that Indiana and Miami are kind of going to run the table. But these Western Conference playoffs, just thinking about it right now, I can't wait. If we were able to see Oklahoma City and Golden State match up, I mean, they've played twice this year and both games ended on buzzer beaters. I mean, it's a terrific matchup. I'm sitting here smiling just thinking about it because I loved watching these games. The Timberwolves and the Clippers, they could maybe match up if the Timberwolves can find their way into the playoffs. That's another one that I love, too. They've played a couple pretty good games. One really good game this year, another one that the Clippers pulled away. It wasn't all that close, but I don't think that it outweighs the positives that are still there with the conferences set up the way they are.
And with going back to just the division abolishment, we'll leave the conference abolishment out of it. In the Eastern Conference, how much do you think that would improve the play? Do you think it would improve the play so drastic, or the matchup so drastically that you might have more of a quality thing, or do you still see it as just you want, say, Boston to be a 7th seed instead of Charlotte sitting at the 5th seed when they should be the 4th seed?
That's pretty much how I feel about it. I don't think that abolishing divisions would drastically change the way the Eastern Conference is right now. I mean, there would be some teams moving up, some teams moving down, but what I really like is just the possibility that divisions are gone, because the quote from Adam Silver, the deputy commissioner who will be taking over for David Stern on February 1st, is that the competition committee is going to look into whether divisions have outlived usefulness, and that's a really good way of putting it. I don't think getting rid of divisions will make that much of a change, but I don't think having divisions is really all that beneficial to the league. I think that overall it would be better without divisions.
That's fair enough. And going back to that Western Conference, who do you think that would benefit more? Obviously, we see that in the Eastern Conference, you've got Boston at the 4th seed when they should be the 7th. We've said that a few times now. Do you think abolishing the divisions would be more beneficial for the West and their quality of play, or do you think it would be more beneficial from a fairness standpoint in the Eastern Conference?
Well, for this year, it would definitely be more beneficial to the East. The West, to me, the West is so stacked top to bottom, it really doesn't make a difference. You know, it's not like right now the division leaders are Portland, the Clippers, and San Antonio, and none of those teams, to me, right now the way it's set up is that the Clippers are in the 4th seed, and the only teams that would be ahead of them would be Houston. If the Clippers weren't leading their division, Houston would be ahead of them. That to me isn't that big of a deal. I mean, both of those teams are pretty similar in skill set. I don't think that Houston is overwhelmingly better than the Clippers. I think that in the long run, at the end of the season, the Clippers could very well have a better record than them. For this year, it doesn't really make a difference for the West just because of how many good teams there are. For the East, it definitely does make a difference. You mentioned Charlotte. I'm a huge Charlotte fan. I mean, not a fan. I'm a Timberwolves fan, but I just really like Charlotte. I really like the way they played. I've enjoyed watching them over the last few years, even though they were terrible, just because I like guys like Kemba Walker. I was interested in Michael Kidd-Gilchrist coming out of college. Now they picked up Al Jefferson, who I'd probably say is my favorite player in the NBA. I'm just a big fan of crafty low-post scorers. That's kind of my thing. They're a team that I would really like to see higher in the standings because of their record. They're a team that they're still on the rise. They've been terrible for the last few years, and it would really benefit them to have a higher seed and have that home court advantage in the first round rather than having to go on the road just because they're not leading their division.
Yeah, and let's just say the Clippers do wind up having a worse record than Houston and maybe even say like a Denver, and which with the way Denver's been playing, I think is not a large possibility, but there's a slight chance that happens.
They definitely could. They've turned it around in the last few weeks.
Exactly, and especially with the play of the Clippers lately and their defense just being as porous as it is. Let's say they do wind up with the 4th seed when they should be, say, the 6th seed. Does that change the dynamics of this and how fast you think it should happen if this is happening in both divisions?
It does a little bit, especially with Denver. I mean, they have one of the best home court advantages in all of the NBA with the high altitude in Denver. I don't know exactly how much that affects gameplay. It could be just a myth, but a lot of people have said it does. It definitely affects the players' stamina, how long they're able to run especially at the beginning of the game. So yeah, I mean, you can't. It's pretty much there is no wrong answer. I mean, it does affect it. You can't get around the fact that if a team should be higher because of their record, then then they should be higher, and it's going to help them by having a home court advantage. But for the Western Conference, it really doesn't make all that big of a deal.
All right, and I'll go through and clarify any confusion there may be on my opinion. I think you should absolutely abolish divisions.
Yes, I agree with you there. Divisions, I think, should be abolished.
Yeah, I think it's totally irrational to still have them, especially with the way that with the trends you've seen that the Northeast and the Southeast conferences have been so dominant over the Atlantic Division. The Atlantic Division has no place being in the top 4 seeds in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. And then, going down to the West with the Clippers, I just see it being a fairness thing down there where you could potentially see maybe the Clippers having a better seeding than Houston, undeservedly worse record. And obviously it's in Brandon's opinion that conferences should not go. I think depending on how you can get it to work, I'm not going to come out here and say that my proposal is, like a surefire, hey, the NBA, you should do this. 19-year-old kid got the perfect idea first try around, But I think that if you can get it to work where you could abolish this and have the 16 best teams in the league be put in the playoffs, whether it be with relocating some teams, whether it be from just abolishing conferences and leaving everybody where there's at. I don't know how you would want to work it. I think that would be the best option for them. And obviously Brandon disagrees. You guys heard that.
Are you kidding me, man? We know everything. I mean, we should be running the league right now. I don't know why Adam Silver's taking over in February. It should be us. What do you think about this idea? I mean, I know I said that I agree they should abolish divisions, but what do you think about possibly keeping divisions, but just changing the playoff format so that the top 8 teams in each conference make the playoffs? The reason you would keep divisions being for travel reasons, because you play the teams in your division more than you play anybody else. You would keep divisions so that teams like, say, in the Northwest Division, the Western Conference, Portland, OKC, Denver, Minnesota, and Utah, they would all still play more than they would play everybody else just for the fact that they could have a little less travel. But winning the division wouldn't mean anything. They would only be for travel purposes. I know that sounds kind of like you're just making these divisions for no reason and there's no winner. What's the point of having divisions? But it would just mostly be for travel reasons.
I could see that working, and I could see that being something that when Adam Silver comes in February says, hey, you guys, competition committee reviews it, I could see that being something that they use for this year even, because it's not something that really drastically alters the landscape of how the playoffs are going to work out. It's going to be something to where you've got you're just going to have a better quality of play in the playoffs, and the teams that want or that deserve home court advantage are going to get it. I think that would work fantastically for this year, even next year. I think if you're going to abolish conferences like I'm a fan of, I think that's going to take a lot longer. I think that would be a 4, maybe even 5-year ordeal where you would have to figure out whether or not you needed to relocate teams. Like, say you moved Memphis out to, or not Memphis, my apologies. Say you move, you put a team in Seattle. Say you just rebuild a whole new team there.
An expansion team?
An expansion team. So then you're up to 31. You change Memphis to the East. And that puts your numbers to where there are 16 teams in the Eastern Conference, 15 in the West. And then you add maybe like a Kansas City team. That was one of the possibilities brought up on that Ion Basketball podcast that we brought up earlier. If you have another Midwest team that could be, they're kind of in the middle, you put them in the Western Conference to where traveling to Denver, traveling to California is not an excruciating flight as Memphis being on the Western Conference where they have to play, I think it's Sacramento and Golden State at least 3 times a year. I mean, that just seems kind of outrageous if you weren't to talk about travel.
Yeah, if there's any realignment going on within the conferences, I think it's totally fair that Memphis would need to be moved to the Eastern Conference. It is just kind of a travesty that they're in the West, but it's because all these big cities are on the East Coast. They all have basketball teams, where the big cities in the West Coast are a little more spread out, so there just aren't as many teams in the West. It would definitely help if there was an expansion team in Seattle. You brought up Kansas City. I know on the podcast, Zach Harper brought up Las Vegas. That's not going to happen.
No.
Mainly because of the gambling and the partying that goes on in Las Vegas. That would not be good for NBA basketball players.
Especially not coming off of the 2000 kind of trend of being a G.
Yeah, it's just not a good idea to have a bunch of rich NBA basketball players out in Las Vegas. They like to party enough as it is. Put them in Las Vegas and things could get ugly. There was talk of another team in California. I'm not sure I see that happening. I don't really know where else that they could put a team in the West. It's not like the East where they have so many big markets for teams.
You could do Albuquerque. They've got their name on the map after Breaking Bad now.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, it's on the map from the show, but I don't know if that'd be a possible home for a basketball team. But there's definitely work to be done among the conferences and in the NBA. It's something that will be very interesting to see what happens, especially with new commissioner Adam Silver taking over in February. You would think that he's got some ideas that he would like to see come into fruition.
Yeah, I'd really like to see Adam Silver come to the league and kind of get this this old, not necessarily traditionalist sense mentality out, but to get some new ideas coming. The league needs a little bit of change. It's been the same for as long as I can remember. With that being said, it's 7:09, going to be 7:10 here, coming up in about 10 seconds. We're going to take a quick break. This is Give and Go on KRNU2.
Hey, I saw you at the UNL Rec Center the other day.
Yeah, I was at the climbing wall.
The climbing wall? Whoa, I've always wanted to try that, but it sounds really dangerous.
It's really not. As a student, you get one free climb every semester, and the staff are trained to keep you climbing secure. But if you want to be a regular like me, you can take a climbing basics class for only $20 and climb all you want for a whole year. You learn about the equipment, how to properly belay another climber, and how to tie knots.
Awesome. That sounds super rad. Are they open every day?
Yeah, it's the best. They're open from 2 to 10 Monday through Thursday, and 2 to 8 Friday through Sunday. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah, man. Totally will.
Start your own adventure with the UNL Campus Recreation Center and Outdoor Adventures. Visit us on the second floor of the rec or go to crec.unl.edu/outdoor.
Sometimes losing can be winning, particularly when it comes to your weight. So says a national wellness campaign that's challenging the public to examine their weight and health and talk with their healthcare provider. The campaign draws attention to the many health problems that accompany excess weight, such as diabetes, hypertension, and others. The Your Weight Matters campaign, produced by the Obesity Action Coalition, offers participants a free toolkit filled with tips to help people talk with their doctor and live a healthier life. To take the campaign challenge, visit yourweightmatters.org.
What do you want to be when you're older?
When I'm older, I want to be a singer. That's my goal.
An organizer of like do-gooders.
I want to be a media mogul.
When I'm older, I want to be anything but the one that doesn't fit in, the one that people don't love.
Everyone deserves a dream. But some of us are depressed,
anxious,
angry,
scared,
don't feel like ourselves.
If that's you, say something.
Talk to someone. People will listen. Add your voice at oktotalk.org. oktotalk.org.
Brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters.
Welcome back to Give and Go on KRNU2. Alongside Drew Montanye, I'm Brandon Wendt. We've got some score updates from around the league. At halftime in Charlotte, Orlando has a 1-point lead, 43-42 over the Bobcats. 7:50 to go in the second quarter. The Clippers trailing by 1 to the Celtics, 28-27. That game is in Boston. Very early in Memphis, OKC's out to a 3-0 lead over the Grizzlies. Also very early in Milwaukee, the Spurs have a 5-0 lead over the Bucks. Early in the first quarter in Minnesota, the 76ers have jumped out to a quick 8-2 lead over the Wolves. The Pistons have a quick 4-2 lead over the Pelicans. And just getting underway in New York, the Chicago Bulls have just scored their first basket. Mike Dunleavy has given them a 2-0 lead. We'll get into the fantasy insight portion of the show. This is where we give you our expert analysis on the best moves to make in your fantasy league. I'll start out with the buy low, sell high players. For those of you who haven't listened before, these are guys that you can look to either sell high because of how good they've played so far with their value expecting to drop, and vice versa, guys who you can look to buy low on, guys who haven't maybe played quite as well this year or haven't put up the numbers you were hoping for that you can maybe go out and trade for and get better value out of them as the season goes on. I'll start off with my sell high guy, and this is power forward LaMarcus Aldridge of the Portland Trail Blazers. This is one of those where I still expect him to be an elite fantasy power forward at the end of the season, but he's put up great numbers so far. He's, I believe, the 4th best power forward, maybe even better than that so far this season. He's just one that I look to decline a little bit, mainly because of the fact that he bases his game off of a jump shot. I've mentioned it before that power forwards, that bigs, that base their game off of a jump shot are not my favorites. That because one, that's usually a mid-range jumper, which is the most inefficient shot in basketball, and two, these guys are almost 7 feet tall. I think that they should be working on scoring inside. So that's one that I would expect to decline a little bit as the season goes on, because he's bound to get cold and start missing jump shots for a stretch for a period of time.
That'll be an interesting conversation later.
Yeah, you think so? You disagree with my thoughts on LaMarcus?
I think so.
All right, well, we'll get to that, definitely. My buy low guys are 2 point guards, one being Isaiah Thomas of the Sacramento Kings. We mentioned him earlier with Grievous Vasquez being shipped to Toronto in that Rudy Gay trade. He's going to see a big-time minutes increase. He'll step into the starting role. He was playing great before the trade. He just wasn't seeing a whole lot of minutes because of his role. Now with him being in that starting lineup, it's one of those where basketball, especially fantasy basketball, is all about opportunity. If you get to play, you're bound to put up better numbers. So that's the case for Isaiah Thomas. My other buy low point guard is Russell Westbrook, and he's one that if you can still find a way to buy low on him, I would do so, and do so as fast as you can, because coming back from his injury, he got off to a little bit of a slow start, but in the last week or so, he's really picked it up. He's had 2 games where he pushed close to having a triple-double. I mean, this guy is starting to get back to the old form of Russell Westbrook that we know and love, so he's a guy that I look forward to continuing to improve as the season goes on, and someone that if you can get a hold of now, I would do so. Now, Drew, I think you've got a few players that you are looking to have a big week this week.
Absolutely. I'm going to start off with my number one guy to have a big week, and that is Kyrie Irving. He's been shooting 53% from the field in the last 2 games, 52% from three-point range. He's been averaging 28 points and 9 assists in his last 2 as well. And he plays at home versus the Wizards, at New Orleans Pelicans, and at San Antonio. This Cleveland team over the last week or so has started to kind of get it together, starting to play really well and cohesively as a team. You started to see the emergence of Andrew Bynum as a low-post presence, which kind of opened up Kyrie's game a little bit on the outside, been giving him some more opportunities to drive. Look for him to have a big week, especially versus New Orleans and the Wizards. And number 2 up is Ty Lawson. Ty Lawson, we touched on it earlier. Denver's playing much better this last probably 2.5, 3 weeks. They have a home and away with Dallas. They're home, then away with Dallas, and then they're at the Timberwolves. Both of these teams have relatively weak defensive point guards, so I look for Ty Lawson to step it up, have some big points and some real big assist numbers. And my last guy is Klay Thompson. He's go at home versus Dallas tonight, then at Los Angeles Lakers, and then versus the Trailblazers of Portland, and lastly next Tuesday at New Orleans Pelicans. Klay Thompson kind of been having a slow last 2-3 games. Really look for him to step up his game after that slow little slump, if you will, and pick up his play. Brandon, you have some pickups for us?
I do. I've got my waiver ads in ESPN leagues. I'll start off with Derek Williams. This is one that really hurts me deep down, being a Timberwolves fan. He was traded to Sacramento and has stepped into a starting role. He's been playing small forward. I would expect him to move into the power forward role after their acquisition of Rudy Gay. He's only owned in 24% of ESPN leagues, and we've seen in the last game against Dallas on Monday, he really stepped up and had a great game. He was knocking down shots from all over the place to go along with the typical alley-oops and stuff that he gets. He's a guy that I would look to should continue to improve just as he gets more comfortable in this offense, but with the addition of Rudy Gay, take that with a grain of salt. He could really see a lot of his usage go down with another star player stepping into the mold there. So that's one that maybe if you've got a lot of depth on your team and you can spare a spot at the end of the rotation, that'd be someone that I would look to pick up. My next waiver ad is John Lure, the former Wisconsin Badger. He's also a native of the great state of Minnesota, where I am from. So that's a big reason why I'm a fan of him. Another reason is the guy can flat out ball. He's really stepped it up, especially with the injury of Quincy Pondexter, which really saddens me to see because Pondexter is a guy who's really improved his game over the last couple of years. He got a big contract extension in the offseason. He was looked at as a key piece going forward in Memphis. With that being said, he's out. John Lewis steps in. He's a guy that can give you a good source of points and rebounds and can also knock down a three-pointer or two from that power forward position, which can be very beneficial in a categories fantasy basketball league. And my last waiver ad is Tyson Chandler, and this one surprised me a little bit. He's only owned in 39% of ESPN leagues. I'm assuming that's because he's been hurt for so long that teams, they couldn't put up with having a guy on their bench that was not playing. So they dropped Tyson Chandler. Well, that leaves it available for the cool cats like me who like to come in and pick those guys up right before they come back from injury. He's someone that can really make an impact. He's going to give you a ton of rebounds and a ton of block shots and shoot at a very high percentage. So that's someone that if he's available in your league, I'd go out and pick him up right away.
All right, I've got two more guys, and I'll just add a note on Tyson Chandler. He's only owned in 68% of Yahoo leagues, so if he is available in your league, I would definitely take Brandon's advice, go pick him up. My two guys, I'll start off with Wilson Chandler. He's only owned in 65% of Yahoo leagues. This Denver squad has really started to step up their play, like we've said a few times, even in the past 10 minutes. And Wilson Chandler, coming off of his injury, I believe he had knee surgery in the offseason. He's really starting to get his legs underneath him. He's always been a three-point threat, and he's a very versatile player. Gets rebounds, gets you some assists on any given night. And then after that, I have Mo Williams. He's only owned in 14% of Yahoo leagues. If you are struggling at the guard position, he's qualified in Yahoo to play point guard, shooting guard, or your regular guard spot. Definitely pick him up. He gives you valuable, efficient minutes, usually around 8 points, 4 assists, and a rebound or two on any given night. So if you have a guy with an off night, those points can really help you in the long run.
I like those additions. I really like Mo Williams. He's playing a great role coming off the bench in Portland. I like the rotation they have set up. They take Lillard out with about 5 minutes left in the first quarter, bring Mo Williams in. Lillard only sits for a few minutes, and then he comes back in to play alongside Mo Williams, which is a rotation that I really like. I'm a big fan of a two-point guard lineup. So that's something that I think he benefits well from, playing with another point guard who can really draw the attention of the defense and kind of give him open looks. So that's one that I really like. Now let's get into my favorite portion of the show, and that is our weekly power rankings. We give the top 5 teams in the league in our opinion. They are sure to be different because Drew and I have some very different opinions on the league. So this is one that I really like, and I'll jump right into it with my number 5 team, and that's the San Antonio Spurs. They've dropped off a little bit as the season's gone on. They've lost a little more recently than they had in the beginning of the season. One thing that really stands out to me that I noticed today when looking at their schedule, their 4 losses are to the Pacers, Rockets, Thunder, and Blazers. And looking at their schedule, they haven't beaten anybody. Their only win over a notable team was against the Golden State Warriors a couple weeks ago, but Steph Curry was out that game with I believe it was an ankle injury right after they played the Timberwolves. So that's just something that it really is a cause for concern for me with the Spurs. I look at the Spurs as being an elite team, and when you see that they haven't really beaten anybody and that they've lost all their games against the elite teams, that's a little concerning to me.
Yeah, I'm going to go straight into my number 5 pick at San Antonio as well. We actually agree on this one. And another thing to note from that Golden State game that they won, that was the same game in which Andre Iguodala went out with a hamstring injury. He was out for most of the second half. So something to really keep your eye on. I don't view this as a too big of a flaw for them at this point in the season. That being said, keep it on your radar. And other than that, I mean, I agree with you, Brandon. I like your pick there. We agreed on something.
Yeah, I'm very surprised about that. We'll move on, though. My number 4 team is the Portland Trail Blazers. This is one that people might disagree with because of the way they've been playing so far this year, and it sounds like you're disagreeing with it too, Drew. I really like Portland. They're my favorite team to watch on League Pass. I look forward to any chance I have to watch them, part of it being because I got Damian Lillard on my fantasy team, but also because I just love the way they play. They're a big ball movement team. They keep the rock moving all the time, which is something that I love, especially being a Timberwolves fan. That's kind of the mantra of the Timberwolves, is the ball is always moving. I love this team. I love LaMarcus Aldridge. I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about right now, because I talked about how LaMarcus Aldridge is a sell high guy. I've got them as the 4th seed, but I'm not kidding when I say I really love this team. I think that they have a chance to be contenders in the West. I don't necessarily think the way they're playing is conducive to the type of basketball that can be played all season long. They're shooting lights out from 3. That's something that, yeah, they're going to be a good 3-point shooting team with the players that they have, but you can't expect the numbers to be the way they are for an entire season.
My number 4, and you're going to hate this, is Oklahoma City.
Oh, really? You think I'm going to hate that? Gosh, I can't believe you put them in the 4 spot.
It's like I know you or something. But I have OKC in my number 4 spot. They beat Indiana, I believe it was 2 nights ago. Indiana coming off of a back-to-back with San Antonio. Grueling matchups to go on back-to-back nights. And Indiana really kind of fell off if you watched the game. They fell off towards the latter part of that 4th quarter.
Well, that game, that really wasn't close at all, though. Even in the first half, OKC was out to a huge lead.
Yeah, but Indiana still at least was putting up a fight, whereas you could kind of tell that they had it in them. They had it in them, and then there's probably 8 or 9 minutes left in that 4th quarter, and they hit the drain. They kind of hit E on their fuel bar, if you will.
They made a push in the 3rd quarter. Paul George got really hot in the 3rd quarter and kind of made that a little closer, and then the Thunder ended up pulling away in the 4th quarter. But throughout that entire game, I really think the Thunder showed their dominance in that game.
Yeah, it was a Thunder-dominated game. I felt like with the way Indiana's been playing that they could have came back and won that game, and they had a little something more in the tank. That being said, I'll move on to my number 3. I have Miami Heat in this spot. LeBron James and the Heat lost to Indiana last night by 6 points. They actually had a 8-point lead going into the half, and then Indiana, Paul George came out, did his thing in 3rd quarter, kind of pushed Indiana, gave them a surge ahead, and they never really let go of the lead after that. That being said, Miami's still one of the best teams in the league. I have them at number 3, obviously. I don't see them losing much this season, so kind of seeing them lose to Indiana, not necessarily a surprise. It was only by 6, but it has its meaning.
Yeah, my number 3 team is also the Miami Heat. I really think they're the best team in the league, other than one other team I think can kind of compete. Well, 2 other teams really can kind of compete with them, but I think the Heat should be at number 1. It's just the fact that they're on cruise control right now. They're in the middle of a season coming off of 2 championships in a row. They're not really worried about this a whole lot, which, I don't know, I kind of think they should be. It seems like they're almost conceding that number 1 seed to the Pacers and basically just saying, go ahead, you could be the number 1 seed, and that worries me a little bit. They were pushed to 7 games last year by the Pacers, and I think it was really beneficial for them to have Game 7 on their home floor in Miami. Just thinking of them having to go to Indiana for 4 games out of a 7-game series, that scares me a little bit, especially with how Indiana's playing and how they've really stepped up with the emergence of Paul George and Roy Hibbert as some big-time stars in the NBA.
Yeah, I just think LeBron James, we've talked about it multiple times. If he wants to win, he's taking the ball and he's going to win. I don't think it matters where he's playing at. I think he can silence a crowd when he's playing at anywhere really in the league, and he can obviously get the crowd going when he's in Miami. He's been known to get the crowd going in New York even, so I mean you can look at it either way.
Yeah, well, New York is one of those towns kind of like LA where it seems like half of the crowd isn't even a fan of the team. They're just there to be seen and to and kind of just take in the atmosphere that is Madison Square Garden. So it's not hard for a guy of LeBron's caliber to kind of take over and take the spotlight in on him.
All right, my number 2 pick here, we'll move on, is the Portland Trailblazers. They're playing out of their mind. LaMarcus Aldridge, after kind of sitting in the shadows of the Western Conference, if you will, the last couple of seasons. Him with the emergence of Damian Lillard, this rotation they've got going on. Nick Batum has been playing out of his mind as well. This whole team just functioning on all cylinders go at this point. I have them at number 2. They're playing not unstoppable basketball, but near unstoppable basketball.
Yeah, I can't argue too much with that selection. I like Portland a whole lot, and I can see why you have them at the number 2, just based off of how they're playing right now. I just still think that although they're playing great, there are teams that are better than them in the league. That's why I had them in my 4 spot. My number 2 is the Indiana Pacers. Like we said, they beat the Miami Heat last night. It was pretty convincing, actually. I mean, I know the score was a little closer, but Indiana really looked good in that game. They kind of showed their defensive prowess. They held, I think, nobody on the Heat scored more than 20 points. So that's something that really stood out to me, and that the Indiana Pacers, their calling card is their defense, and they showed it off last night against a team that plays very efficient offense in the Miami Heat.
Yeah, I agree. It was a really interesting game to watch. You knew it was going to be a defensive battle. These are both teams that Indiana obviously prides themselves on defense. You've got one of the best, if not the best, defensive player in the league on Miami, and LeBron. I think he's a terribly underrated defensive player. So the no player over 20 thing doesn't really shock me too much. That being said, it did still have some significance.
Yeah, I really, to me, the no player over 20 was big to me, because how often do you see LeBron James score less than 20 points in a game? It's not very often. He shot 6 of 16 from the floor, if I remember correctly. That just shows that Paul George is an elite defender. I mean, we already knew he was, but if you can guard LeBron James and hold him to those kind of numbers, that's scary for the Heat, especially with the possibility of them having to be the road team in a Game 7 in Indiana in the playoffs. That's something that I really think isn't getting enough attention around the league right now. The media has kind of given the Heat this elite status, which they completely deserve, being 2-time defending champs and having the king, LeBron James, on their team. I mean, I completely agree that LeBron's the best and that he really can take over whenever he wants, but one player can beat an average team, but can one player beat an elite team like the Indiana Pacers, especially in a 7-game series with the Pacers having home court advantage? I mean, we'll find out. It's going to happen. I mean, barring a miracle of some team upsetting either the Pacers or the Heat, they're destined to meet in the Eastern Conference Finals, and that's something that I really look forward to.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And with my number 1 pick, I've got the Pacers here. I think right now they're a better team than Miami. Obviously, Miami's in cruise control. We've talked about that. They're playing out of their mind right now. That back-to-back loss at OKC, I don't give that too much importance, especially with the first part of that back-to-back being San Antonio, another elite team. They've just been blowing opponents out all season when they win, and their losses have been relatively close. So I have Pacers number 1.
I can't argue with that. The Pacers have shown to be one of the best teams in the league, and arguably the best team in the league so far this season. That moves me on to my number 1 team, a team that we have a lot of disagreement on. They were 4th in your rankings, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. This team has continued to impress me throughout the season. I've never been a big Thunder fan at all in previous years, but this year I've really kind of changed my ways and become a big fan of this Thunder team. I really like, they're just so athletic, and they're great in transition. They've got the best scorer in the league, an elite scorer, a sniper in Kevin Durant, a guy who can score from anywhere on the floor at any time. Russell Westbrook, who's a terrific point guard, a guy that it really took me a long time to have him grow on me. I wasn't a fan of the way he played until I kind of realized that how aggressive he is necessary for Kevin Durant to get his opportunities to score. I just love the way this team is playing right now. They've only lost 4 games so far this season, one of which being to the Timberwolves early in the year. That one, to me, the Timberwolves were on fire at that time. They really weren't losing at all to anybody. So that's something that is a loss to take with a grain of salt, especially with Russell Westbrook being out. He was coming back from that torn meniscus. Their other losses are to the Clippers, the Warriors, and then the Trailblazers most recently. I mean, those are all pretty good teams. The Clippers were on fire that night, getting up and down the court. That was also the night that Serge Ibaka was ejected late in the first half, and he was having a great game to that point. So that's another loss that I take with a grain of salt. Their next loss was actually the night after. They had a back-to-back against the Clippers and Golden State, both on the road as well. That was a really close game that went right down to the wire. I don't know if anybody remembers, but Russell Westbrook knocked down a three to take the lead, and then as time expired, Andre Iguodala hit a buzzer beater. I mean, that was one of those games that could go either way. Two great teams squaring off. And then their most recent loss was to Portland last week. Another great game, went down to the end. Portland pulled away in the fourth quarter, but that was another one on the road against the team that you had at number 2 in your power rankings. A loss like that, doesn't really hurt you that much. I just love the way this team is playing, and a big part of it was I narrowed it down to OKC and Indiana as my 1 and 2, and I figured that could go either way. They, either one could be 1 or 2. So what I brought it down to was the matchup, and obviously, I can say, well, they beat them 118-94 the other day, which to me was a very impressive win, even with the fact that Indiana was on a back-to-back. They really handled them in that game. But also just the matchup in general, not counting that game, just the matchup of the two teams. A big part of Indiana is their defense, obviously. They have the terrific post defender in Roy Hibbert plays, kind of the way that OKC plays kind of neutralizes. They don't in a way score when they match up because they don't really score all that much on the shooting side. Kevin Durant, they're more of a jump shooting team with Kevin Durant, and even Serge Ibaka gets most of his points on mid-range with jump shots from. They do score inside with drives from Westbrook and Durant, but a lot of those are into fouls. Both of those guys are so good at drawing fouls. That's something that the way really hurt Roy Hibbert and the way he can impact the game, because one, he can't affect the game by blocking shots because they can't be scoring inside all that much. And two, when he's playing those taken out of the game because of foul trouble when he's playing those guys who love to get to the free throw line.
Yeah, lots of facts there. I can argue with much of that. The only thing that I have not a bone give them station to kind of they were on a give organization their credit. They were on a 4-game West Coast traveling, being on the Indiana 7th night, being away from Indiana on a back-to-back from San Antonio to the OKC game played out. I just think that had a lot to do with how that game played out. I don't give that to the game as a whole, much meaning to this matchup as a whole. I think Indiana's defense can definitely neutralize strong OKC's, like you said, strong suits, which is like you said, shooting from the floor, shooting jump shots. They have perimeter defenders, incredible perimeter defenders, and Paul George, David Weddle, another Stevenson, and David Weddle is another really good low post player who is able to come out and defend in that mid-range on Serge Ibaka. And the only thing they have with the Thunder is they don't really have. I don't consider Serge Ibaka a legitimate go-to scoring option. They don't have that go-to guy if the other team was all having down Katie and Russell, or if those two are both having off. And kind of even if one of them's having off, you can kind of let them go. Like there's no true or real. Like true third option.
My response to that is the fact that Oklahoma City Thunder who come in and multitude of guys who can come in and take on that scoring low. If Westbrook and Durant aren't doing so, and another thing is that score, they don't have that 1-3 stud score, but they're 1 and 2. I don't think they are better than any 1 and 2 in the league. I don't think that you can find another 1 and 2 scoring option in the league that's better than them. I mean, LeBron and Dwayne Wade over the years definitely was injured. It's Russell and Dwayne Wade over the years because of these injuries. Russell Westbrook and Durant are both prime elite scorers. They're young. They're in the prime of their careers. They're two guys that can both take over the game on any given night. We saw that game against Indiana. They both took over the game. I mean, they both had terrific games. And that's the big reason why they were able to just blow Indiana out of the water. Is that third scoring option? I know he's a multitude of guys. Third scoring option. I know he's not a true third scoring option, but he's a guy that can get you on 15 points on a given night. Just efficient. And 15 points in a very efficient mid-range. Just take get good occasional open mid-range jump shots, posting your occasional layup, post score. They also had Reggie Jackson who really stepped up off the bench. He kind of stepped into that James Harden role, that 6-man, as terrific as Russell Ball is, because as terrific as Russell Westbrook is college guard, he's a guy that's shooting guard jumping out of college. He's a guy that can play just as well great balls. He does on the ball. He's a great cutter. He can catch and slam on a river cut. He cuts to the basket. He can catch as well as Durant. He loves to play off the ball, so they catch and shoot. But then he also so many scoring options. Even with a team that shares so many different scoring options. Even with Jeremy Lamb, who's a guy that's stepped up a little bit this year. He's the kind of guy that can just hang out in the corner, jump shots on the wing, and knock down open jump shots.
I agree with you. OKC, yeah, I'll give me wrong. OKC, and don't get me wrong, OKC is a fantastic team. I just don't play. I see teams like I don't see teams. I don't see it working. But I see teams like Indiana, getting to Westbrook and Durant get their get their piece of the pie. Let them get their points. And a team like Indiana, a team like Miami can go play and shut the rest of those players down with their defensive schemes. There's something happen yet. We haven't really seen it happen yet. It's real early in the season. OKC hasn't played a terribly hard schedule yet. That's out of real 4 or 5 games. I think they've had that real close. I think they've got 4 losses on a few of those. I just consider kind of to be anomalies. I think 1 or 2 of them being when Westbrook wasn't there. There were a few others that were away back-to-back touch versus, away games versus touch. That being said, we're going to take a break here. Does Devin go 38 on KRNU2? Does Devin go?
Wasn't so messy. You wish your roommate wasn't so messy. Are you tired of your roommate but not stealing your food? Maybe the roommate should be a cat shelter. Cat house here in Lincoln is largest no-key cat shelter in Nebraska, and there's always looking for people you adopt. The volunteers who work there will make sure you are paired with a cat to meet your well and expectations. Then cat will sit on your lap when you're feeding your sleep on a family busy shirt. All it takes is feeding your cat once a day and making sure it has no roommates overrated. Get a cat no later report at the cathouse.night.eu or at their website at cathouse.org to volunteer today.
Whether college graduation hands in a few months or in a few years, it's gaining hands-on experience in college facilities is a stressful step is acquiring, while a college degree is a fruitful step towards acquiring a college career. Today's employers are looking for college graduates that already have some experience under the belt. Here at Hustler Career Link, we're here to ensure that you're looking for your resume for skills. By simply uploading your current resume and skills, we can connect you with hundreds of employers to hire college students to fill their intern, part-time, and filling time positions. Get started. Log on to HustlerCareerLink.com today to get started.
Like that's life. All of it's amazing. I read on my shirt. The bill is amazing. Eating the blur and bun. Changes that like the look and the breath. There's that really that I forgot to stop. Cause it's something but I really don't see next to the stars. This reality but think something like me to ride that storm. Got some brokers in the scene. Right to take the tires. Got hot air in the chains. Summertime. Hot to be on for them in summertime. It reminds me of one of them. Sunshine watching. It's like sunshine.
Welcome back to Give and Go Basketball. Welcome back to Give and Go Basketball. I'm Joe Taylor. Inside 2 after the short break. I'm Drew Montanye alongside Brandon Wendt. Here is winning at Story. Orlando is winning to Charlotte 67-62 at the end of the third quarter. We got halftime from Boston with 30 Clippers down 45-39. OKC is 25-20. The 2 lead at Memphis off by the second quarter. Just tipping it off, getting started right here. Now San Antonio at Milwaukee right now leading 38-26. Philly is up to play in the second quarter. Philly is up by 15 in Minnesota with about 9 minutes of the game going on as well. The Pelicans, we got 2 other games going on right now. The Pelicans at home up 4 on Detroit, 9 minutes up from that. And New York Knicks up 4 on Chicago, 21-17 with about 10 minutes left in the second quarter.
I guess it's time to get into our previews, right? I guess it's time to come into our previews, right? For we've got ring games this week. We've got a really intriguing week ahead of us from now until our next really one Wednesday. We'll start off with one really good game tonight, and start off with the one that is 2 Dallas Mavericks 30 on ESPN. The Dallas Mavericks visit the Golden State Warriors. What are your thoughts on this game, Drew?
Golden State I'm really looking for Golden State to come out and win this game. That's my prediction. I've got them. Hopefully, kind of get them back on track here. I think they should be have some more time after that. I think the next game after this one it is going to be the Golden State idea for when he should be back. And I can't see Clay Thompson and Steph Curry keeping this cold shooting series of the game coming out. I see those two in the points of the game coming out and really putting some points up on the board.
Yeah, I've got my this whole lot. I've got my key to this game being the Golden State Warriors are attempting to stop their power forward for the Mavericks. He caught the power forward for the Mavericks. He's a guy that causes a lot of matchup problems for really any team that he matches up against, being 7-footer that really outside scores. But I think this really causes a major problem for Golden State in particular. They've got a terrific offensive center, not Andrew Bogut, but he's not going to necessarily he's going going to go out and guard anybody on the perimeter. He's kind of going to stay close to the basket and be a rim protector. And that leaves David Lee on Dirk. That's a matchup that Dirk will really like to exploit. David Lee being really only about 6'9", maybe 6'10" if you're being awfully generous, 7 foot compared to Dirk, who's outside 11, 7 foot. He stretches it outside. He can really shoot over anybody with the way he shoots with the ball, fall way back off his 1 foot with the ball really against way high above his head, known for his defense. Really against a guy like David Lee, who's not known for defense in the first place, is one that I think Dirk will really be a shootout. So this game will really be a shootout, though. The Golden obviously the best scoring options in Golden State are their guards, the Splash Bros, them Curry, Herndon, and it's not a matter of perimeter defenses. It's not neither right home or Jose Calderon and Monte Ellis. Neither of them, I think they should be known as terrific defenders as well. I think they should really take advantage of that as well. And then being a shootout heading into my prediction being the Mavs heading into Oracle and coming out with a win tonight. I just think that it's one of those games before they go down to the wire and attack in fourth and as a shootout. And I see Dirk kind of stepping up and scheming over the top.
Next matchup here is Portland doing on Houston, not going to Portland on ENT 9 Central Time on ENT tomorrow night. Who do you have for your key to this game and who do you think should win?
My key to this game is the 3-point shooting. These are two teams that really like to hack up the 3-point shots. Portland being the best 3-point shooting team in the league so far. I just think that that's going to turn out. Both of them are going to be shooting. This game should turn out. Both of them are going to be shooting a lot. It seems that whoever is most effective will probably come out with a win in this game. And that's how I've got Portland winning this game. Last time they matched up also in Portland, and really thought the Rockets, really took over the game. It wasn't even close. I think a big part of it had to do with the Rockets' excellent perimeter defense of Damian Rockets point guard Patrick Beverly. Damian Lillard really made when watching it that Damian Lillard really couldn't get into that rhythm throughout the game. He couldn't get into that rhythm that he likes to get in. He'll knock down 7 threes in a row and get into rhythm. And that really sets up his game. He hits a couple threes, his ability to drive into the basket. He hits a couple threes, then the defense has to come up and foul that, and he gets to the basket as well, and either gets fouled, taken out of the game as well. He was really taken out of the game. I think that that'll turn around this game. I think Portland probably learning from that last loss center, and being at home at the Motor Center, it's another great home court advantage. I see Portland coming out with victory on Thursday night.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Portland's going to win this game. I think actually, I'm not sure they're going to expect us, but I think they're winning rather fashion, if you will. Convincing fashion, if you will. I don't see Houston playing good enough defense to stop anybody on the best team. The guard defense, I know Patrick Beverly's their point guard right now, but yeah, James Harden just it's a pretty interesting defense. Hard here in Portland. That being said, the guards here in Portland and their team all around really a shooting team. Houston really hadn't had much of a jump chancer. Houston were really good at the jump shot. So outside, I would 3-pointers. So like you said, I would agree. I see Houston coming out, or not Houston, sorry, Portland coming out on top here.
All right, and that brings us to our next matchup, the Lakers Friday at 7 on ESPN, and the Lakers visit my number 1 team at Oklahoma City Thunder. And for this, I have the key being the matchup in this game. I really don't think the Lakers match them OKC at all. It's not a good matchup for them. If you think about it, in years past, Kobe Bryant has guarded Russell Westbrook, who I will add Russell Westbrook has been a Lakers killer throughout his career. He put up against the Lakers absolutely incredible numbers against the Lakers, and I look for that injury. I don't really know if they will be coming back off of an injury. I don't really know if they can trust with Kobe Bryant to match up with Russell Westbrook in this game. So who does that leave guarding Westbrook? Steve Blake, maybe. I mean, if that's the case, 40 point looking for possibly a 30 or 40 point night from Westbrook. Lakers, and also Kevin Durant. I mean, the Lakers wing players, Jody Meek, there's no way can Kobe be the guys that there's no way can match up for like a 6'10", 6'11" sniper like Kevin Durant, especially with the athleticism that he has to go along with those skills. I look for this game to possibly even be a blowout. Not because just because I'm such a big, I think Oklahoma City supporter, someone that I'm thinking obviously. I think Oklahoma City is an excellent team. Of them, I think the number 1 spot, but more for the Lakers. I think this is a really bad matchup to the Lakers. I think that the Lakers should really dominate. Thunder should really dominate this game.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Oklahoma's going to kind of wipe the floor with the Lakers on this one. Kobe coming Lakers not trying to, Kobe coming back, kind of trying to not fit into that play, and still they're not really playing, great basketball. They do, they got it figured out, and they know how to do it. And you said Berlin, these matchups are just atrocious for the Lakers. I could see them both Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. I could see them both having more than 35 points. So just because they're matching another dictated to me. So and we've got another Friday night game, Minnesota and here for it is Minnesota at San Antonio game. Not the rescheduled game from the last Wednesday we had in Mexico City last Wednesday at 7:30. This one will be on Monday at 7:30 Central Time on Yankees League Pass. What do you think about this one?
This is a game that's really intriguing to me, obviously being a Timberwolves fan here, but also being the Timberwolves that they've had in years past. Even when the Timberwolves weren't as good of a team, they were going into the rough stretch that they went through after the Kevin Garnett trade. I think a big part of that Spurs very well. I think a big part of that, at least in recent years, is the inside frame of the Timberwolves, and that is the key to the game to me. Nikola Pekovic is just a beast on the inside. He's very shallow, and he's someone that the Spurs seem to have a little bit of trouble with. Both of their bigs inside are more tall and lanky bigs, and less powerful and strong bigs with Duncan, Thiago Splitter, and Tim Duncan. And that's something that doesn't really affect him much because he is the tall guys don't affect him too much because he uses the shot that he wants and his leverage to kind of spot the shot that he wants to. And I think that's why he does so well against the Spurs. With that being said, it should be a little close in this game. It should be pretty close, though. I think it'll go down to the wire Spurs. But the effectiveness of the Spurs offense, the system that they run, how efficient they are, especially with them being at home, that's a big part of this. I think that I maybe would pick the Timberwolves road this game was in Minnesota. Being a road game for the Wolves in San Antonio, I've got the Spurs coming out with the victory.
I'm going to win this game up there. I think Minnesota can win this game. I think their outside guard play, Ricky Rubio's really been stepping up and playing shooting more efficient than he usually does as far as shooting goes. Having 4 or 5 monsters. Kevin Love last night had just a monstrous game. Until Pekovic, like you said, awesome matchup down low versus Spurs. That's nothing that really gets talked about. Just kind of a little. That's nothing that really gets talked about. It's kind of like a few thing I have here. Pop kind of like so there's a few of these games here to talk about. I think he likes to give the media something to talk about. He's something to kind of get his team going. I think he just likes to get media on. He has to egg the media on if he will say, after this year, those Spurs are going to fall one of the last games. So you say, I think this is Minnesota's games. You can say, you have a team in Minnesota who's young, kind of hung up, if you will. Then you go in and beat San Antonio, not that, but I would roll over for one of those games. But I feel like this is one of those games where you play Tim Duncan, Ginobili, Tony Parker play limited minutes just so that you have that possibility.
I definitely could see it happening. I know that I definitely could see it happening. I know that last game that was supposed to take place in Mexico City, I had particularly close to win. I think it's a great matchup. There should be a close game, and you're definitely right. There's a just good possibility that they're going to come out with this win. I think that the home court advantage for this chance kind of links over and give the best chance Friday night. We'll move on to our third game on Friday night. Also got a great game on Friday night. This is also an ESPN game in Rock 9:30. The Houston Rockets will travel to Aurora to take on the Golden State Warriors. What are your initial thoughts on this matchup?
Well, my initial thoughts are that this is going to be an absolute shooting out. I could see 220. I think we're going to see at least 220 points scored here in this game just because of the defensive play of both. My matchup here is going to be the matchup between Klay Thompson and James Harden. I love him. I see Klay Thompson. I look at him. 3-point shooter. I see a great 3-point shooter. A very efficient guy who's got a little bit of a low post threat to his game. But he's going to work on that. Looks like he worked a lot on it over the offseason. He's been improving down there. And he's a very, very underrated defender. If you watch him, he's very good in isolation. I don't know if next time he taught him when he came over in the offseason. He came not sure where he kind of came from last season. He was kind of a if that would be wish-wash defender. That being said, win this game. I really look Golden State to come out and win this game, but not only because of Thompson, but hopefully the addition of hopefully his schedule, I believe, to come back that game. I don't see how.
Yeah, this is really intriguing matchup for me. Yeah, this is a really intriguing matchup for me. Was the last time they played was Friday, December 6th, and this was an interesting game for me. It was a home game for the Hand Rockets, but they really kind of handled Golden State completely. They ended up winning over the Warriors 105, probably 83 over the Warriors. That was really surprising for me. They held Steph Curry to 4 of 15 shooting, and Klay Thompson to 2 of 10 from something that you don't see all too often. It's from the Warriors. Houston Gardner. The key to this game for me is the Houston Red defense. I've mentioned in this show already today and other shows before. I'm a big fan of the defensive prowess on the perimeter. Watching Patrick Beverly, just from watching him play, he's an absolute in your face. He's the kind of guy that constantly be in your face. You see, he was last year on the playoffs against Oklahoma City. He was such a passer that he knew with Russell bothering him on the inbounds because he hit him, bothering him on an inbounds pass. It's going to hit him tough for Steph Curry. That's something that's elite. It was going to make it tough for Steph Curry. I mean, more as elite of a shooter he is, like as elite of a scorer he is. Except a matchup like Patrick Beverly, who, like I said about Damian Lillard, he takes guys out of their rhythm. He makes it tough for them to get it going and get those shots to start falling, which is what really the key is for a shooter. Once you get falling, so that into that rhythm, you just start knocking them down. So that makes it tough. And also another intriguing that match for me is, and also another intriguing one for me is Harden, as you mentioned, is Klay Thompson. Harden, as you mentioned, has been atrocious. Never been against defenders, and he came out. He's really never been a good defender against the Magic. He came out before the game on Sunday against the Magic and said that he acknowledged the need that he's been playing terrible defense and that he really needed to step it up. And in that game, he held Aaron Flalo, who's 17 to a great start this year, to 8 of 17 shooting, only 17 points. I mean, he really stepped it up. And a big part of defense is effort. You don't necessarily have to be the greatest defender in the world, but if you try hard, you're going to do a little better. So if he's putting a conscious effort into playing to help him out a little bit, that's something that I look to help him out score a bit too, especially guards on the lead score too, like Klay Thompson coming out with this win. That instead of like the Warriors coming out with this win, I feel like they've just learned from that previous game. Just like I said, I believe in one of the previous games, Houston and Portland. I believe it was after Houston and Portland. Maybe they just learned from that loss. After that game, Portland maybe just learned from that loss tomorrow night against Houston, Golden State tomorrow night. But I also think that Golden State are going to learn defense. And it's another thing. No matter how good your guard defense is, it's pretty tough to slow down Steph Curry and Klay Thompson.
Yeah, and I think not necessarily this matchup. I already just give you guys Klay biggest matchup key there, which is Klay Thompson, Klay Harden. But I think the other thing that's going to play, if Iggy comes back, that game another good ball the ball. That gives you another ball handler to bring the ball down the court, take some pressure off of Steph, getting him to come off some pick and rolls, get very good in shot. Iggy's very good at that. There's an article on Gray right now where he's come from. Iggy's play kind of where he's kind of has developed his play as a player, kind of a Scotty Pippen and his team shots. He gets other guys on his team shots in ways that you don't really see on the stat sheet. He sets up picks where he needs to. He knows how to make that hockey as decent pass and where to put it so that you can get instead of waiting for another pass out to the opposite range for an open shot in this game. I really look for if he can come back in this game that really just makes Klay Thompson stay that much better to the point where they definitely would
you definitely think it's a huge key to this Golden State team. He's really helped them out it's really hurt them since he's left because of his injury. I mean, he came in at the beginning of the year, and this team was clicking on all cylinders, putting up crazy scoring numbers. I think that his return will help them not only on the offensive end, but also on the defensive end, and that's something that should impact them. If he's back, and with the fact that they're playing at home against Houston, I think they definitely come out with the victory. And that'll move us to our last game of the upcoming week, and that's the San Antonio Spurs at the Los Angeles Clippers. That game is Monday night at 9:30 on League Pass. What are your thoughts on this one?
My initial thought is this is a really good matchup. That being said, it is really interesting from the fact that you have two of these top four teams. Obviously, we talked about it earlier. Clippers probably shouldn't be a top four team right now if you abolish the divisions. That being said, I feel like the Clippers do come out on top on this one. I think this is another one of those games where we're at that point in the season where you saw Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu play some bigger minutes early in the season. I think Pop will go to kind of rest them up a little bit, maybe even in this game as well. They don't play a game on Saturday or Sunday. So this game at the Clippers, I could see another thing where, heck, maybe even have Tim Duncan stay back in San Antonio. Manu's been known to, or not Manu, Pop has been known to do that in the past. And I think it's a very intriguing matchup from the point of you don't really know who's going to play even. J.J. Redick obviously out at the 2 for Clippers. Chris Paul, though, playing out of his mind. You got a really good point guard matchup. I'm not a fan of Tony Parker, but you know he is Tony Parker. You have to respect the fact that he is Tony Parker, and what he's done is nothing to not be recognized.
Definitely. And my key to this one, along with my key for just about every Clippers game so far this season, is the pace of play. And to me, that's because of the way they play. When you have no defense whatsoever and you run this fast-paced, high-scoring offense, that means the pace is pretty much what decides whether you play well or not. And that's something that I look for the Spurs to really control. With how efficient their offense is, they're able to get a lot of made baskets, not a whole lot of misses. You know, they shoot a high percentage from the field. And when you're coming off of a make basket, it's really hard to push the ball up the floor, and it's hard to control the pace. It's easier to control the pace when you play tough defense and get a turnover or force a missed shot. So that's something that I think the Spurs can really take advantage of. Another thing is that the Spurs play great defense. They, although they're old and maybe not quite as athletic as some of the other teams in the league, they know how to play deep better than just about anybody based on what they're given, what kind of athleticism and skill set they have. They play a great defensive system that Pop has ran there for years and years. So I think that they're going to be able to control the pace of this game and come out with the win. I think that this will almost be a statement game for the Spurs. They know that this is a game that they can win if they play their basketball and control the pace. So I think, especially you mentioned Pop having, or the players having 2 games off or 2 days off the day before. They don't have a game on Saturday or Sunday. I think that Pop will play all of his guys that game and kind of come to look and make a statement and say that, you know, when we got it going, when we're playing our basketball, we can come out with a win.
Definitely. Let's take it to a quick break here. We're getting to the top of the hour, 8 o'clock. We'll come back with some discussion on our top 5 power forwards in the league. This is Give and Go on KRNU2.
When you were growing up, you probably enjoyed playing recreational soccer, baseball, or football. Why shouldn't disabled children be able to do the same? Homer's Heroes allows children from the ages of 5 to 17 with physical or intellectual disabilities to play in baseball games. Volunteer buddies are always wanted and appreciated by the children to help them play during the games. For more information on volunteering or donating to the Homer's Heroes, go to LincolnLittleLeague.com.
Make-A-Wish Nebraska is celebrating their 30th anniversary. Since 1983, children with life-threatening medical conditions have had their wishes granted by Make-A-Wish Nebraska. Every year, more and more children qualify for the program, and you can make a difference. Change a child's life today by making a personal donation, setting up an online fundraiser, or becoming a volunteer. Help celebrate the giving of hope and making dreams come true for these children. For more information, visit nebraska.wish.org.
If you need your prescription filled, but don't have the cash that most other stores in your area are asking, stop into the University Health Center Pharmacy. Most things are priced lower than your community store rates. The Health Center Pharmacy is located on the main level of the Health Center at 15th and U Street, making it accessible for all students. Call 472-7457 or stop by today. Do not make the mistake of paying too much for your prescription.
The beans on ramps that isn't stolen. My dreams are censored. My hopes are born. I'm like a fiend that finally sees when the dope is gone. My nerves is wrecked. Heart beating in my head is swollen. Thinking of the G's I'll be holding. Picture me rolling. They see that?
Welcome back to Give and Go on KRNU2. Alongside Drew Montanye, I'm Brandon Wendt. We've got some score updates from around the league. Late in the fourth quarter, we've got a real good game going on in Charlotte. The Orlando Magic lead 83-79. About halfway through the third quarter, the Clippers have a 1-point lead, 55-54 over the Celtics. Late in the second quarter, the Thunder have a 40-37 lead over the Memphis Grizzlies. very late in the second quarter, just about halftime, the Spurs are out to a 21-point lead, 59-38 in Milwaukee. Also late in the second quarter, the Philadelphia 76ers are really giving it to the Minnesota Timberwolves, 61-43. About 2 minutes left in the second quarter in New Orleans. The Pelicans have a 55-46 lead over Detroit. And with 2:35 left in New York, the Knicks are out to a nice 13-point lead over the Bulls. That game is 37-24. We've got 2 more games going on for the rest of the night. At 9 o'clock in Sacramento, the Jazz take on the Kings. That is the much-awaited debut of Rudy Gay in a Kings uniform. And like we mentioned earlier, at 9:30 in Golden State, Dallas plays the Warriors. That game is on ESPN. And now I'd like to get into another one of my favorite sections of the show. It's our weekly kind of ranking of something different. We've already done the point guards, shooting guards, and small forwards. Now we're moving on to the power forward position, which is a very intriguing one to me. There are a whole lot of great power forwards in the league, and this should be cause for some nice debate. What's your number 5 guy? Who do you got to start off your list, Drew?
Might be a little bit of a shocker to some people. I've got John Henson here at the 5.
Ooh, I like that one.
I pulled up some of his numbers earlier today, and ESPN has him sitting above in about 0.2 of a point above Blake Griffin in PER. His per 36 measurements are incredible. Right now he's playing 9 minutes less a game than Blake Griffin. He's averaging per 36 4 more points, 4 more rebounds, only 1 less assists, and 3 less turnovers. The numbers that are just amazing to me for a second-year guy. I think if he can pick up his minutes, which he should here now with the season-ending injury to Zaza Pachulia, John Henson is a freak of nature right now.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of John Henson. It's a little surprising to me that you've got him in your top 5. I wouldn't go quite as far to having him in the top 5. But that being said, I really like the way this guy plays. I initially saw him I've seen him before, but I initially took notice of John Henson in the preseason this year. I watched a couple games against the Timberwolves, and he looked really good. This is a guy that's long, he's athletic, he plays very efficiently on the offensive end. He doesn't take a whole lot of bad shots. He's got a nice little post game, a solid little lefty hook shot that he can knock down about over anybody, really. He can't be stopped when it comes to that move. He doesn't take it a whole lot just because of the fact that he's not really the main focus in their offense. But I really like the way he plays. He rebounds. He blocks shots. He had a huge game last night. Really helped me out because I have had him on my fantasy team now for most of the season. So I like that pick. It's a little premature to me to have him in the top 5, but I definitely think he's got the potential to be that type of player.
And who do you have at number 5?
My number 5 is Serge Ibaka, and this is one that it's kind of in that same mold of John Henson, that efficient down low or that efficient offensive player. The fact that he really only takes good shots, he takes wide open jump shots. And he's one of the best mid-range jump shooters in the game, which is quite surprising. And I know mid-range jumpers are an inefficient shot, but a lot of bigs take mid-range jumpers. That's really the only way that most bigs can score outside, unless they are able to step it out to the three-point line like a Kevin Love or a Dirk. But he's a guy that I just think is super efficient. He plays his role terrifically on the Thunder. He's been the leading shot blocker in the NBA each of the last few years. He's a guy that I just love the way he plays, and I love how he fits in with this team. So that's why I've got him in my 5 spot.
Yeah, I don't have Serge Ibaka in my top 5. I don't view him as a top 5 power forward in the league. That being said, he is a great player, plays the position very well. Moving on, number 4, I've got Dirk Nowitzki here. Dirk Nowitzki, veteran in this league, still does what he does best. He's got, like you said earlier, that real high release fadeaway jump shot from 15 to 20 feet. Pretty much gets it wherever he wants on the floor. And it's impossible to guard. I won't even go as low as saying nearly impossible. I've never seen anybody able to guard him when he's got that shot falling down. On the season, he's got 21 points per game, about 6 rebounds, 3 assists. These are, steady and they're efficient numbers, which, as most of you know by now, I love efficiency out of a player. Who do you have at number 4?
I also have Dirk Nowitzki as my number 4 power forward. A big part of that is just how he's kind of resurgence after this injury last year. He missed the first half of the season, came back, really wasn't himself, But this year he's shown that he is back to his old ways, the Dirk Nowitzki that we know and love. And it was really apparent to me Saturday night against Portland, in Portland, close game all the way down to the wire. And those last few minutes of the game, they were literally just feeding Dirk on the left elbow or the right elbow, either side, and he would just post up, go to his signature fadeaway, 1-foot jump shot, and drain it every single time. It was great to watch. I really like seeing Dirk getting back to his old ways and kind of showing that he's an elite power forward in this league.
Definitely. Who do you have at number 3?
My number 3 is LaMarcus Aldridge. He has had a great season so far. He's a guy that I've been a fan of for quite a few years. He's kind of gone under the radar in Portland, but he's always put up big numbers. I really noticed him mainly because of the fact that I'm a Timberwolves fan and they play in the same division, so I was able to see LaMarcus a couple times a year, and I really like the way he plays. I mean, I know that I've mentioned before I don't like that his go-to shot is a mid-range jumper. As an elite scoring power forward, I don't mind that in Serge Ibaka because that's not really his thing. He's not a scorer. He just takes those mid-range jumpers when they're given to him. LaMarcus, on the other hand, is a scorer. He's looked to kind of create his own scoring. They feed it to him in the post, and he takes a lot of turnaround, fadeaway jumpers. I've said it before that I don't look at Kevin Garnett as an all-time elite because of that. He never won. Oh, he won one title, but that was with Boston after he left Minnesota. He never was able to bring the Timberwolves over the hump. I think a big part of that had to do with him being the number one option on his team and having his go-to move be a turnaround fadeaway jumper as a big. I like to see my bigs take it inside and use their size to their advantage, and that's really why I have Aldridge where he is as the third power forward. I think he could be even higher if he worked on his inside game a lot more, especially being basically 7 feet tall. He's probably 6'11".
Yeah, I've got Kevin Love at number 3. I don't disagree with your pick there. Kevin Love at number 3 is averaging 24 points a game, 14 rebounds, about a half a block, and a handful of assists. His PER is third in the league behind LeBron and Anthony Davis. Some outrageous stats there. You brought it up. A lot of his game is stretch. He's a stretch four for the Timberwolves. He doesn't do a lot of inside offense. Excuse me. He doesn't do a lot of inside offensive play. He goes in there, scraps up for some offensive rebounds, gets some putbacks. But a lot of his points come off of not post work. It's jump shots, 3-point shots, things like that. And then at number 2, I have who you had at number 3, LaMarcus Aldridge. I think his game is more focused on the inside. He doesn't stretch the floor. He still brings it into that. He keeps it in the mid-range. He's also a defensive threat. Not threat might be too strong of a word, but he is better at defense than Kevin Love is, and I feel like that's a pretty significant thing to be good at if you're going to play the 4 in this league.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Those guys can go either way, and my number 2 is Kevin Love, so that just shows that they're pretty much around the same level of power forward in the NBA. I have Love a little higher, one, because of his ability to step it out and shoot threes. That's something that not a lot of power forwards can do, and it's a weapon to have a guy in the power forward position who's able to do that, because it's hard for other power forwards to come out and to defend a 3-point shooting big. So that's something that I really like about him, and he does it efficiently. He's not a bad shooter by any means. He's actually an elite 3-point shooter, I would consider him. He won the 3-point contest a few years ago, and that's something that he's added to his game. He really wasn't a 3-point shooter when he came into the league. But another thing that pushes him over the top for me is his rebounding ability. He is an elite rebounder. He's a guy who's a threat to get you 15 to 20 rebounds on any given night. I mean, if you just watch the Timberwolves, it's crazy to see how he's just a ball magnet. The thing it somehow finds him. Every single time a shot goes up, it seems like Kevin Love is coming down with the ball. So that's why I have him at my number 2. And that brings me to my number 1, one that most of the NBA pundits, the media members, might disagree with a little bit just because of his youth, but that's Anthony Davis. This guy is the man. I absolutely love him. He can do it all on the court. That's what I love so much about him. He is an elite defensive power forward. He swats shots like crazy. He's a great rim protector. He also gets a lot of steals for a power forward. He's very athletic. He runs up and down the floor. He can dunk and lay up in transition, finish well at the basket. He also shoots his free throws, is a great free throw shooter for a power forward, and he can also knock down a mid-range jumper. This is a guy that to me, is already the number one power forward. This list is of guys right now where I think they are, and I have him as a power forward. And to be honest, I think the sky's the limit. I think he's only getting better.
I agree with you. I have Anthony Davis as my number one power forward as well. His per 36 minutes are pretty nuts for a second-year player. He's averaging per 36 minutes 20 points, 11 rebounds, 4 blocks and 2 assists, 2 steals, and only 1 turnover. And he does not foul out of games. He's only averaging 3 personal fouls a game. This kid, like you said, sky is the limit. He is an absolute baller when he is healthy, which obviously he's not right now. He's second in the league in PER. He is very efficient with the ball. He doesn't take a lot of ill-advised shots. And I think the most important thing for him is that he's learned to play within the system, something a lot of guys struggle with when they first come into the league. They're used to kind of playing their style of ball. But Anthony Davis has really fit this system that he's been put into down there with the New Orleans Pelicans, and I think that's one of the reasons that we both have him up here at number one.
Yeah, he's just terrific. The thing that really stands out to me as well about him is he's able to play well off the ball. A lot of these guys, like a LaMarcus Aldridge or a Dirk, you need to feed them the ball and let them go to work. They don't do much off the ball. Love's a little better off the ball just because of his three-point shooting ability. He's able to find ways to get open for three-point shots. But the same can be said about Anthony Davis on the inside. He'll either work and work and work to try to get an open look either in the mid-range or a basket cut to maybe get a slam dunk or something of that nature. But he also is terrific on the offensive glass as well. He uses his length to his advantage. He's got an incredible wingspan. He can go up and get those offensive rebounds for putbacks. And I like his skill set as a big. He can handle the ball. He can pass very well. I think a lot of that has to do with what's known by many people. It's not much of a secret anymore, is that he was very small in high school. He said early on in high school he was a small player. He was a guard, and he basically just stood in the corner and looked for three-pointers. And then he hit a big-time growth spurt and turned into this kind of freak of nature, a very tall and athletic big who also had the skill set of a guard.
Yeah, and I think that you talk about his skill set, and there's really not a true weakness to his game. He's very efficient. Obviously he's not the stretchiest of fours. I think if he were to go and try and add a stretch game, maybe a three-point shot, mid-range jumper, this kid would just be a force to be reckoned with. If he adds things to his game and improves what he's got, he could very well be in the discussion for top 5 player in the league,
really
even next season.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I love where this guy's headed. I mean, the big key with him has got to be staying healthy. He dealt with a lot of nagging injuries last year, nothing too serious, but he missed a solid amount of games because of those injuries, and then now he's out for 4 to 6 weeks because of a broken hand. I mean, that's cut down now. He's already been out for 2 weeks, but I look for him to continue to improve and hopefully become an elite player. We've got about 15 minutes left on this extended show. We're going to take a very, very quick break, and we're going to come back with an interesting conversation. Last night, Drew and I talked about a possible playoff matchup, and we didn't agree too much on it, so we're gonna get to that when we come back from this quick break. You're listening to Give and Go on KRNU2.
Trying to find a job upon graduation can be scary and frustrating. Where should you look? Who's hiring? Is your resume good enough? Don't let the stress get to you. UNL's Career Services is here to help. They'll help you find a job that's perfect for you, and their services are free. For more information, go to www.unl.edu/careers or call 472-3145.
Welcome back to Give and Go on KRNU2 alongside Drew Montanye. I'm Brandon Wendt. We've got just under 15 minutes to go in the show. And last night, Drew and I got together to do our weekly show prep to get ready for this. And we got to talking about a possible matchup. We mentioned it earlier in the show. There's been 2 games so far this year between the Oklahoma City Thunder, my number one team in power rankings, and the Golden State Warriors. And both of these matchups have gone down to the very end. The first one in Golden State, Oklahoma City took the lead with a late three-pointer by Russell Westbrook, only to be taken away after by a terrific buzzer-beating shot by Andre Iguodala. And then in the most recent game in Oklahoma City, the game went to overtime, and in overtime, the Oklahoma City Thunder had a terrific play where it was an offensive rebound that was tapped back in by Russell Westbrook. Thabo Sefolosha grabbed it. Westbrook shot to the corner. Sefolosha hit him, and Westbrook made a terrific buzzer beater three to win the game for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And there's a lot of talk about these two teams maybe matching up in the playoffs and how great of a series this would be. And Drew and I got to talking about that. What are your thoughts on that possible matchup, Drew?
Well, after last night and the 30 seconds or so we let ourselves talk about it, we both kind of got the feeling that we're on opposite sides of the pool here. It is, in my opinion, that when healthy, and that is a very big asterisk here, when healthy, Golden State, I think, can absolutely beat OKC. Brandon, I know you have some strong disagreement with that.
Yeah, I definitely do disagree. I don't disagree in that Golden State can win. Anybody can win on any given night, and even in a 7-game series, I think Golden State would have a chance to win. But I just don't see them beating the Thunder in a 7-game series, just for the mere fact of the athleticism and the force that Oklahoma City plays with. I mean, Golden State bases their scoring off of shooting. They're complete jump shooters, Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. Neither of them are very athletic basketball players. Neither of them. I mean, Drew's giving me a pretty harsh look right now. But I mean, I don't know how you can argue with that. Stephen Curry, he's quick, but he's not overpowering in it by any means. He doesn't explode to the basket. I mean, he can get to the free throw line occasionally on drives, but for the most part, Steph works a three-point game and then maybe like a floater game when he drives to the basket. And Klay Thompson isn't very athletic either. I mean, he's athletic in that he plays good defense, but he doesn't score off the dribble really all that much. He's mostly just a catch and shoot, or he'll look for post matchup advantages on smaller shooting guards. But the Thunder, on the other hand, have the extremely explosive, athletic Russell Westbrook, who can explode to the basket at any time. In the blink of an eye, he'll be by you and throwing down slam dunks or great layups through contact at the hole and getting to the free throw line, along with, without a doubt, the best scorer in the NBA, a guy that Jalen Rose coined the nickname Iceberg Slim, which is a nickname that I really enjoy. I think is funny. And that's Kevin Durant, the 7-foot tall, arguably. I mean, he's listed at, I believe, 6'9" or 6'10", but people say that he's 7 feet tall, especially with the long wingspan that he has and the range that stretches well beyond the three-point line, as well as his ability to put it on the floor, use that terrific crossover that he has. I believe it's a left-to-right crossover, and then get to the free throw line at a prolific rate.
Yeah, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are not athletic in the sense that they are going to drive by you and dunk in your face like Russell Westbrook will. Russell Westbrook isn't really, in my opinion, comparable athletically to anybody else. I think he is, behind LeBron James, the second best pure athlete in the game. His speed is unmatched. His athleticism, overall unmatched, rivaled only by LeBron James, who I believe would top him in an athletic competition, if you will, if there was such of a thing.
LeBron James would top just about anybody in the whole world on something like that. The guy's a freak.
Exactly. The only other person I could see even challenging LeBron James in an athletic contest in the world would be Russell Westbrook and Calvin Johnson, wide receiver of the Detroit Lions.
Or maybe even the Greek freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. He's a bit of a freak himself.
Anyways, I don't argue with your pick that the OKC could win. I think if healthy, Golden State would win, and here's why. Andre Iguodala, when healthy, he's one of those guys where you don't see, I brought it up earlier, you don't see what he does, and every little thing he does leads to scoring opportunities or fast break points or turnovers, just all these little things for his teammates. He is one of the reason that Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson were able to shoot 65% from three-point range in the first 6-7 games of the season. He is insanely underrated because in the fact that his stats don't show what he does. And I'll continue to bring that up. He sets picks where guys need picks. And one of the things that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, but when you watch a game, look to see when Andre Iguodala is handling the ball on the wing, swings a pass to Klay Thompson, and the defender who was on, who may be double teaming Steph Curry, whatnot, has to come over to help with Klay Thompson. Watch how Steph Curry will move off ball to get around his defender, get an open look on the three for that second swing pass from Klay. These are the things that Iguodala does that they currently don't have. Part of the reason why you see them not necessarily winning some of these games, Curry's been double-teamed the second he gets to half court, having to dip the ball off to Klay Thompson, who is not as good of a ball handler. Obviously, he still has the capability of controlling the ball. That being said, the other part of Andre Iguodala's game that is relatively underrated is his defense. He is one of the few, I would say, 2, possibly 3 people in the league. Well, I'll leave it at 3 people in the league who can defend Kevin Durant and not neutralize him. You don't neutralize Kevin Durant. It's impossible.
You can slow him down, though. That's the best.
Exactly. You can slow him down. Andre Iguodala is one of those guys who can hold him to 22 to 25 points a night instead of 30 to 40, depending on how hot he's shooting. And with Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson shooting 45 to 55, depending on which one you want to look at, percent from three-point range on open spot-up looks, and coming off the screen on pick and roll being the man guy, I see no way that with the three-point shooting of OKC that they could keep up with OKC if healthy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad you brought up underrated defense in Andre Iguodala because I think that one of the most underrated things about the Oklahoma City Thunder is their defense. They are currently 5th in the league in defensive rating. This is a team that has been terrific defensively for the last few years, but the deal with them is that they don't get as much attention on defense because they have these 2 elite scoring options in Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. They're a team that plays terrific defensively and uses that great defense to get out in transition. Along with the Miami Heat, and maybe the Los Angeles Clippers as well, they are one of the best teams in transition in the entire NBA. I mentioned the athleticism of Durant and Westbrook and the ability to score at the basket as well as on jump shots. This team, to me, is the total package, especially with the addition of Reggie Jackson kind of stepping into that role as a third scoring option off the bench, a guy that can control the ball and also get shots for himself. This is just a team that I really love. I mean, I know I sound like a broken record. I'm saying this over and over again, how high I am on the Oklahoma City Thunder, but it's something that I've watched all season. Even at the beginning of the year when Westbrook was out, I saw glimpses of what this team could be. Now that he's back and getting into the full swing of things, I really like the way they're playing, and I really like the potential of this. I think that this matchup is a great one with Golden State, no doubt. This is a matchup that would almost surely go 7 games if they were to play in a playoff series. But I think that the NBA is really all about defense and athleticism. I mean, shooting is huge, especially in the new style of the NBA. The three-point shot has become a weapon in the league as opposed to before it was just a nice thing to have. Now teams use it to their advantage like completely. They really can take over a game with three-point shooting, and we've seen that with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. But it's also something that you could live by, but you can also die by very easily. I mean, they're terrific three-point shooters, but you see in a game like last night, they lost to the Charlotte Bobcats. And I know that Steph Curry had a whole lot of points in that game, but he didn't shoot very efficiently. He had a terrible first half, didn't really score a lot. He worked as hard as he could to push back and kind of continue to make his way back into the game. And excuse me, I said that game was last night. It was 2 nights ago on Monday. But they worked so hard to push back into that game, but they just couldn't dig themselves out of the hole that they had gotten into by shooting so poorly in the first half.
Yeah, the only thing with OKC's defense, the only hole that I can see, I'm looking at some advanced statistics right now on Synergy Sports Tech, their off-screen shot percentage on defense, they're allowing over 49% off the screen and over 52 on threes. That is something if you're going to beat the Golden State Warriors, you've got to fix that problem. That is something that they thrive off of. You can see a lot of David Lee setting picks for Steph Curry coming across the court. Steph Curry getting an open wing look, sometimes corner. He can even bring it out to where he'll run to the wing and have a second pick, usually Klay Thompson, waiting for him at the top of the key.
I love those 1-2 pick and pops that they run with Curry and Klay Thompson. That's a great play they run.
And absolutely, and I could see OKC dying from that standpoint. They with Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson shooting between 50 and 55% off of those plays on average. We're a quarter of the way through the season. We're about done with the small sample size stuff. If OKC can't improve that, with Iggy coming back, Bogut being the rim protector that he is, David Lee getting his 20, and Serge Ibaka being a good defensive player in every sense of the term, possibly, holding him to maybe, it could be anywhere from 10 to 20 points. He usually averages about 22 a game. But if you can't fix these off-screen problems, you have major issues on defense versus this team as far as a matchup goes.
Well, and I think that's something that definitely can be fixed. We saw teams are kind of starting to figure out how to play Golden State. And Golden State is a lot like Kevin Durant. You're not going to stop them, you're not going to neutralize them, but you can at least slow them down by playing effective defense on them and kind of figuring out the best way to defend them. I mean, you're not going to stop them, like I said, but you can definitely find ways to slow them down. And that's something that I really think Charlotte did a good job of on Monday night, and it's something that teams will take notice of. And as the season goes on, it's going to be something that is easy, not easy, but is able to be figured out by other teams. I mentioned that athleticism, and skill is something that you can't figure out. You can't stop Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant because they're just better than you. They just are able to get by you because they're bigger and they're faster and they're stronger than you. But with shooters like Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson, they need that system. They need that setup. If they're not able to be set up to score, then they're out of luck. So if teams can figure out how to defend them effectively, I think it makes it tough for them. And the longer they are having this run as an elite team or close to an elite team in the league, the longer teams have to figure them out.
And I'll end it on this note. In a 7-game series, streakiness can sometimes be of importance. Klay Thompson and Steph Curry as a duo have yet for more than 2 games at a time been under 40% shooting from the three-point line. So that's something to look forward to if you're a fan of stats and streakiness, things like that. This is Drew Montanye alongside Brendan Wendt. We're going to check out for the night. We'll see you guys next week at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, December 18th. This has been Give and Go on KRNU2.